Disclaimer. I do not claim ownership of this story. All rights belong to the original creators. Title: I'm drawing manga in Naruto. Page 141. You know you'll get beaten if you only say half of what you mean? Inuzuka Ishii threatened fiercely, and then tugged at Tsukumo. Tsukumo hasn't finished reading it yet, he's only read less than half of this volume of One Piece. He was pulled at that moment, and his expression became dazed. Tsukumo, this guy always cuts the plot off at crucial moments. Don't you think we should teach him a lesson? Oh, I have something to do, I'll head back now. Tsukumo's mind was filled with images of swords and spears, and he couldn't hear anything else. Lu Ming was slightly taken aback, not understanding what was going on. Inuzuka Ishii, however, only paused for a moment before quickly understanding what was going on. After Tsukumo left, he smiled wryly and said, "Tsukumo must have had some inspiration. He's always like this when he has inspiration in swordsmanship or ninjutsu. Could it be that he's going to use a three-sword style?" Akabane said in surprise. The only sword technique mentioned in the first two volumes is Zoro's three-sword style. Chapter 149: Mirage in the Fog. White Fawn's version of the three-sword style? Imagine Tsukumo with a knife in his mouth, two knives in his hands, and wielding the Chidori blade. The picture is so beautiful. Akabane covered his face, unable to imagine that scene. However, upon closer reflection, he felt that the three-sword style was unlikely. While that style might be feasible in One Piece, it was too flashy and unsuitable for the many ninjutsu in the Naruto world. He believed that Shuramae had his own judgment on this matter. I'm going to continue my walk around Iwamaru. If I get home late, I won't be able to finish some of my work. Inuzuka Ishii put Iwamaru down and prepared to go home. I went back too. I just gathered some herbs and I smell like medicine all over. Lu Ming was somewhat disappointed. The title was so sensational, but the content was just so. Really? Clickbait headlines are no good. He silently complained to himself. May you two have a safe journey. Kurama Yunlang, who had just been looking serious, immediately began taking inventory after they left. Then, he exclaimed in surprise, "Young master, we've sold 100 copies in just 2 hours. It looks like we'll sell out today, and the new stock should arrive tomorrow, which will be just in time to replenish our stock." Akabane's smile was radiant. Clickbait titles are really satisfying. It used to take me more than a day to digest 200 books. By now, nearly half of them have already been sold. Young master, you've done a good job with the publicity. Through observation, Kurama Unro clearly figured out some of the essence. Hey, don't try to use clickbait titles, or you'll get beaten up. Akabane offered very kind advice. He was a disciple of Danzo and a highly skilled young genius. No one dared to come up and beat him up while wearing a black cloth. Anma Yunlang is different. He, young master, I understand. He let out a strange laugh. Akabane had no idea what he was thinking, but he had a bad feeling about it. After thinking for a moment, he pointed at him and warned, "Don't try to pin the blame on me, or I'll beat you to death." Hey, what are you saying? How could we possibly do that? Although Anma Yunlang said this, his voice sounded somewhat unsure. Akabane didn't dwell on it much. If we really want to shift the blame onto him, it's no big deal, he's got a lot of debts to lose anyway. Someone came to call the person in the room. Akabane pointed to the shadow clone inside. Clear. Anma Yunlang nodded. Akabane didn't go home, but instead walked along the road out of the village. With both books updated simultaneously, his points surged. I just redeemed chakra enhancements yesterday, and today I have over 600 points again. With chakra and points, some previously useless ninjutsu can now be exchanged for. For example, the Water Dragon Bullet technique and the Great Waterfall technique. Both ninjutsu are very powerful, but they consume a lot of chakra. Previously, Akabane was short of chakra, and since he had to prioritize exchanging points for physical enhancement, he didn't have any extra points to exchange for these two ninjutsu. Only now is the time to exchange them. Both ninjutsu have a large range and are not suitable for use within Konoha village. The most suitable place is undoubtedly the training ground in the Forest of Death. But upon arriving at the Forest of Death, Akabane saw several snakes. It's not surprising to find snakes in the jungle, but these snakes are clearly not normal snakes, each one possesses a high degree of intelligence. Upon seeing him, they quickly disappeared into the jungle. Is Orochimaru here too? This place is closer to the comic book shop, and Akabane chose it just for convenience. He never expected to run into Orochimaru here. He followed the direction the snakes had fled, but after a moment he sensed Orochimaru's presence. Kibakuin, I didn't expect you to come here. Orochimaru emerged from the woods, holding a small device in his hand. Like Akabane, he was clearly testing new ninjutsu here. Akabane glanced at it. This device looks like the device used by the Sound Ninja. They've already mastered the Sound Ninja's ninjutsu so quickly? He was a little surprised. Even though Orochimaru got the comic book and read the contents immediately, it has only been 2 hours since then. I had thought about creating an armor to enhance my wind release ability, and with some modifications, I could achieve the state you described in your book. Orochimaru raised his right hand. On his right hand was a modified arm guard, then his hand jerked. Chakra surged forth, and a piercing shriek rang out. Boom! In an instant, the trunk of a small tree nearby was smashed to pieces. Orochimaru sighed and said, "Something seems wrong with the hole. It can't generate effective attack sound waves, but I accidentally discovered this function." Akabane's eyes widened. Wasn't that the sky-slicing wave? He truly deserves to be a great scientist in the future. He hadn't even drawn it yet, but Orochimaru figured it out first. However, given its power, further research is needed before it can be used in actual combat. Orochimaru finished his test and put away his armor. For him, such ninjutsu was not particularly powerful, and since it required equipment to use, it was relatively useless. Orochimaru had a strong interest in researching it as a new type of ninjutsu. He glanced at Akabane and asked curiously, "What kind of technique are you here to test?" "Water Dragon Bullet Technique." Akabane casually exchanged for the Water Dragon Bullet Technique. After consuming 100 points, a surge of knowledge emerged from his mind. Orochimaru was slightly taken aback, then immediately became interested. "Can I watch from the sidelines?" He didn't ask Akabane how he learned it, because this technique was widely known in the ninja world and could be obtained through many channels. "Of course, you can help me record the power, and also help me refine a technique idea later," Akabane said casually. "Can. What techniques need to be improved?" Orochimaru was curious, and even a little excited. Akabane didn't explain, and walked to the more open training ground ahead. There are no rivers here, but the humidity in the forest is quite high, so even without a river, one can still unleash a powerful water-style ninjutsu. Akabane reviewed the memories in his mind once more. The original Water Dragon Bullet technique has very complex hand seals, but the Water Dragon Bullet technique obtained from the system even has a simplified version. This surprised him. Orochimaru stood aside, waiting for Akabane to perform his technique. Not long after, Akabane formed hand seals, and with incredible speed, the simplified Water Dragon Bullet was swiftly released. "Hey!" The water dragon flew out from the water that gathered around him and flew towards the distant mountain rocks. There was a roar. The rocks in front of me were broken and fragmented, leaving a small puddle underneath. What a powerful force! Orochimaru was astonished and looked Akabane up and down. To unleash such power, an enormous amount of chakra must be required. Not bad, the consumption is much less than I expected. Akabane was very satisfied. The Water Dragon Bullet is very powerful, which gives him another ninjutsu that can directly attack in addition to genjutsu. What about your other technique? Page 142. Orochimaru was already impatient. Although the Water Dragon Bullet was powerful, he wasn't interested in it. What really interested him was the new ninjutsu that Akabane had mentioned. Hold on. Akabane glanced at the sky, checked the light, and then began to form hand seals. Not long after, a thin mist rose up around them. The technique of concealing oneself in the mist? Orochimaru frowned. What effect could this level of mist possibly have? He was somewhat puzzled, but not long afterward. He saw Akabane draw his kunai and rush towards him from afar. Orochimaru was puzzled, but he still attacked. However, the next second, he noticed that the concentration of the fog was changing. In some places, the fog thickened, while in others it thinned. Meanwhile, the people running through the fog transformed into several streaks. The clone technique? Orochimaru was puzzled, but the next second he saw several figures stop at the same time and form hand seals. Water release water dragon bullet technique. The 6 water dragons roared up, making it impossible to distinguish which was real and which was fake. Orochimaru dared not be careless and quickly retreated and fled. The next second, the water dragon burst out of the mist. In that instant, Orochimaru noticed that the water dragon had multiplied into 7. Illusion? He had a guess in his heart, but he also felt it was impossible. When the water dragon bullet landed, Orochimaru was even more surprised to see the actual situation. The water dragon bullet landed in a different location than he had expected. If you try to dodge based on your prediction, the result might be that you get hit and suffer a crushing defeat. Is this an illusion? He was somewhat surprised. It was unbelievable. It's an illusion, yet it's not an illusion. Akabane released the mist concealment technique, and as the mist dissipated, his figure vanished as well. Upon seeing this, Orochimaru fell into deep thought. Clearly, those figures and the multiple water cannons are related to the fog. Why is that? Mirages occasionally appear in deserts, at sea, and in dense fog, and I use a similar method. Akabane explained. So that's how it is. It wasn't an illusion, my eyes deceived me. Orochimaru muttered to himself, then shook his head, realizing, there's also hypnosis. You used hypnotic guidance techniques. What I'm thinking about is whether it can be combined with illusion magic to make this spell more varied and unpredictable. Akabane shared his thoughts. Orochimaru thought back to when he fought Akabane. The battles that constantly switched between reality and illusion left him exhausted. If this technique is combined with illusion, it will inevitably become even more bizarre. But upon closer examination, it seems that its practicality is not that high, because Akabane can create a geographical environment, but the opponent can also use ninjutsu to destroy his environment, thus the technique will naturally be broken. Akabane was also troubled by this, which is why he wanted to add illusion magic, but that created another problem. If 5-sense control works, why go through all this trouble? Since illusions manipulated by the 5 senses are ineffective, it seems that methods combining illusions are also useless. Perhaps there are other uses as well. Orochimaru's eyes lit up, and he said, what would happen if this technique were combined with the crescent moon dance? The dance of the crescent moon is indeed very useful. Akabane was slightly taken aback. This sword technique was an assassination sword technique that used clones to deceive the opponent, causing them to reveal a weakness, and then the real body in the shadows would launch a sneak attack and kill them. If combined with the illusions created by the fog concealment technique, it might actually have a surprising effect. Perhaps there are other uses, I'll go back and look into it. Orochimaru pondered for a moment, but ultimately did not give a definite answer. He didn't understand the art of concealing himself in the mist, he could only truly understand many things after experimenting with them. Thank you very much. Akabane's decision to seek out Orochimaru was impromptu. He hoped to leverage Orochimaru's research abilities to find a more effective use for him. Now that the other party has agreed, he certainly won't refuse. Chapter 150, Handing Over the Village? Is there a banner? Try again. Orochimaru's voice was somewhat hoarse. He hasn't rested for 2 days straight, constantly researching how to maximize this skill. Ah. Akabane formed hand seals, and mist rose. In that instant, 3 kunai were projected. Wind escape big breakthrough. Orochimaru formed hand seals quickly and used ninjutsu to disperse the mist. But the moment the mist was blown away, a kunai split into 3, and 3 or 4 figures emerged from the mist. The figures in the mist were blurry, and it was impossible to tell which were real and which were fake. The major breakthrough ended, and the fog closed up again. However, at this moment, Akabane appeared in a completely unexpected location, as if he had teleported. Success! Orochimaru made a gesture, indicating that Akabane should stop attacking. Akabane stopped, slightly out of breath. He didn't stay up for 2 days, but he did go a day and a night without sleep. The continuous training left him somewhat disoriented. How's the effect? After resting for a while, Akabane stood up. Not bad, it achieved the desired effect. Orochimaru took a sip of water to relieve his fatigue, then thought for a moment and said, "This technique is very practical, I suggest we hand it over to the village." "If we hand it over to the village, will we get 500 yuan and a banner?" Akabane said it casually. "What?" Orochimaru was stunned for a moment, not understanding what the banner meant. He thought for a while and said, "There's probably no money or the banner you mentioned, but there might be other benefits." "Sigh, how could I possibly care about such petty gains?" Akabane coughed lightly. "That's just a lie." Orochimaru remained silent for a moment, then turned and headed towards his residence. "Hey! Wait a minute, I'll treat you to dinner." "No need, I just want to sleep now." Orochimaru answered calmly. As a ninja, it's no problem to not sleep for 2 or 3 days in a row, but if you're constantly focused on finding solutions and weaknesses for Akabane, you'll get tired no matter how energetic you are. "Okay, actually I'm tired too." Akabane hung his head. A day and a night was pure torture for someone like him. Fortunately, he succeeded. The first self-created ninjutsu in some sense. However, no sooner had they arrived at the village than the Hokage's bodyguards arrived. "Kurama Akabane, the third-generation lord requests your presence." "So fast?" Akabane was taken aback. The third Hokage was picking peaches way too fast. He should at least be given some time to rest. "Yes, please come over here." After saying that, the other person left. Akabane pondered for a moment. The third Hokage was in such a hurry that he obviously didn't just want to reap the rewards, there were likely other reasons as well. So the reason is... "Alright, Naruto seems to have updated today. Oh dear, my brain is malfunctioning." Akabane patted his forehead. "I was so busy with experiments that I forgot to update today." Not only that, the 8th volume has been updated to chapter 43. The Shadow Clone was really impressive the day before yesterday, drawing 7 chapters in one day. Therefore, the 9th volume goes directly up to chapter 50. Orochimaru, the main antagonist in the early stages, makes his dazzling debut in this volume. Until his human experimentation was exposed, Orochimaru was the third Hokage's prized possession, which explains why he was ambushed in the village. It seems to be related to this. Akabane had no choice but to turn around and head towards the Hokage building. There's no way around it, the Hokage is the highest-ranking official in the village. He walked towards the Hokage building and soon ran into an acquaintance. "Hey, Akabane." Zishao waved to him from a dozen steps away. He then quickly ran over, pulled out today's update from his pocket, and excitedly said, "You actually drew Orochimaru today, and you look so handsome, that makeup." "Isn't he handsome?" "I think so too." Akabane was pleased. Orochimaru in the manga was indeed incredibly handsome, though there was a slight difference between him and his anime counterpart. Otherwise, he would have changed roles long ago, and there would be no need for all this trouble. Yeah, it just doesn't quite match Orochimaru's vibe." Zishao smiled and said. He clearly didn't pay much attention. Orochimaru was already a rogue ninja in the manga. Page 143. Besides, I wouldn't care too much if I saw it. He believed more in the Orochimaru he knew than in the manga. Will Orochimaru become a rogue ninja? A third-generation disciple, a genius about to be promoted to Chunin, a star among the common people of the village, and a future Jonin. Given his multiple identities, no one would believe him if he said that. That's why I have to go to the third-generation lord's place now. Akabane shrugged and muttered a sarcastic remark. What? Zixia was stunned for a moment, but then she saw that Chiyu was indeed walking towards the Hokage building. It seems to be true. He touched his head, not quite understanding what was going on. When Akabane got downstairs, he looked up and saw the third Hokage standing upstairs, looking down at him. He waved and then went up from the first floor to his office. Come in. The third generation didn't close the door or turn around, but he knew it must be Akabane who had come. After all, taking such a leisurely stroll around the Hokage building is currently unique in the world. Lord Third Generation, what brings you here? Akabane lowered his head and asked. Akaba, why does Orochimaru have this kind of appearance? The third Hokage's forehead veins bulged. That Kabuto was also one of his subordinates, and so was the Sound Village. Because the plot required a villain, I asked Orochimaru for his consent before drawing him. He agreed to play the role, so I drew him like this. Akabane said honestly. Is that really all there is to it? The third Hokage's expression was rather grim. This was his most valued disciple, who, in the manga, became a major villain and betrayed the village. It's that simple, there's no complicated reason. Akabane sighed. Although the real reason is not so simple, it is actually not complicated. There is no need to go to such lengths, to the point of not even letting him sleep. The third generation sat down, and their complexions improved slightly. He turned to a page, pointed at Uchiha Sasuke, and said, "What's the deal with the Uchiha clan?" For the sake of the plot, he became an orphan. Akabane felt somewhat embarrassed, he probably didn't even believe what he was saying. Humph. The third generation gave a cold laugh. You could lie to a 3-year-old and they might not believe it, let alone the third Hokage. Alright, third Hokage, are you aware that several new Sharingan have recently awakened in the Uchiha clan? Akabane said. 8. This is the information from the Dark Division. Hiruzen Sarutobi gave an exact number, and by saying this, he clearly knew about Akabane's temporary management of the Umbu. Akabane nodded and continued, the Sharingan is the eye that reflects the soul. It understands love, loses love, and then understands the preciousness of love. It stimulates the spiritual power and eye power to complete the evolution of the eye. But external stimulation is not only the death of loved ones. Of course, the above is my personal speculation. Since Madara Uchiha and Izuna Uchiha, no one has awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan yet, so at this stage, the Sharingan that everyone talks about is limited to those with 3 tomo or less. At the kaleidoscope level, simple stimulation can no longer explain it. I see. The third generation took a drag of his cigarette and fell into deep thought. Akabane's statement is not without merit, otherwise, there wouldn't be 8 newly awakened Sharingan within the Uchiha clan, more than double the number from 3 last year. He pondered for a moment, but then his head started to ache again. It's a good thing that the Uchiha clan is becoming stronger, but if the internal problems aren't resolved, things can't continue like this. The third Hokage thought for a moment and then asked, since you're temporarily in charge of the Umbu, have you been paying attention to the Uchiha's recent activities? There hasn't been much movement yet. Let's wait for the next chapter of the comic to come out before we see. Akabane answered honestly. It seems that Uchiha Genkai is planning something big. As the third generation exhaled smoke rings, some guesses were already forming in his mind. Your wisdom is truly admirable. Akabane lowered his head and said, if there's nothing else, I'll head back now. The third generation shook his pipe and said with a smile, no rush, sit down first and let's talk about your new technique. He'd rather watch us work on our research all night than help us, and then immediately come out to pick the fruit as soon as we're done. That's not how a Hokage should behave. Akabane muttered helplessly, he knew this guy had been spying on him for a long time using his telescope technique. Well, it's much more fulfilling to figure it out yourself, isn't it? The third generation smiled broadly. Not at all. I almost called out to ask if you were there halfway through. Akabane's eyelids were twitching. This was the first time in his life that he had worked so hard for a whole day and night. I will no longer help you. You have a complete idea, but what you lack is data and practical application skills. Only through your own experience can you truly understand this. The third generation spoke this very seriously. The biggest problem with self-created techniques is the lack of practical application, and sometimes this problem is fatal. TCH, then I'll just hand over the ninjutsu. You should know how it's used after watching the process, so I won't go into details. Akabane didn't believe that a dignified ninja could be so blind as to not see through this. I don't know what you mean by banner, but you can make a request. As long as it's within my power, I'll grant it. After a moment of contemplation, the third generation spoke. Really? Akabane's eyes lit up. Of course it's true. I've heard that the Book of Sealing contains some forbidden techniques sealed by the First Lord. Akabane said. What? I am very interested in the techniques in the Book of Seals. Akabane coughed lightly and said. No, those are all precious and dangerous forbidden techniques. The three generations solemnly proclaimed. Can we just look at one technique? No. The third Hokage insisted that the techniques in the Book of Seals were too dangerous, and he would not allow them to leak out. Akabane felt a little regretful. If he could take a look, he would definitely learn the Flying Thunder God technique first. With that technique, you can put a spell in the comic shop, put a spell in your home, and draw a spell for Shuamao and Zishao. From then on, you won't need to go out. Unfortunately, it won't work. He thought for a moment, then said, Then I'd like to see the name, just the name. I'm sure there's a sealing spell on it. Just looking at the name? The third generation was stunned for a moment, completely not understanding what this request meant. What's the point of just knowing the name? Yes, just look at the name. I'm very curious about what forbidden techniques the first generation master left behind. Akabane chuckled. The third generation fell into deep thought. As long as it's a name, does that mean it has to be used in the manga? Chapter 151, you can only look, you can't touch. You're going to use it in a comic? The third generation took a drag of their cigarette and found it difficult to make a decision. To say that I agree is an overstatement, since those were all forbidden techniques stipulated by the first generation leader. Or disagree. The name itself doesn't seem to have any problems. Your wisdom leaves me in awe. Akabane offered another compliment. The third generation tapped the table with his pipe and said confidently, That sounds fine, but I always feel like you have another meaning to it. A bead of cold sweat appeared on Akabane's forehead, and he quickly explained, How could that be? I'm just admiring your unparalleled wisdom. Well, it's best if not. It's not impossible if it's just a name, but your viewpoint in the comic has to be correct. The three generations solemnly proclaimed. Please rest assured, I will definitely promote positive energy and contribute to the peace of the village. Akabane was very confident. He received various forms of support when he was drawing original comics in his previous life, and he is an expert in promoting positive energy. The third generation paused for a moment, pondering the meaning of positive energy. It probably means that the idea is correct. He pondered to himself, tapping his fingers rhythmically on the table. After a moment, the third generation got up and headed to a certain spot in the room. Is there a sealed book in that corner? Akabane glanced over but saw nothing. The next second, he saw the third Hokage walk over there and quickly form hand seals. Then, the scroll appeared. Naruto managed to steal the location by using ninjutsu to conceal his position. It must have been really hard work for the third Hokage. Akabane silently complained to himself. With such protection standards, even a jonin might not be able to find it without knowing the location and the ninjutsu counter, let alone Naruto, who isn't even a genin. The third generation took out the scroll and spread it out on the table. You can only look at it from here, and you can't touch the scroll with your hands. The third generation turned the scroll around so that Akabane could view it more easily. Page 144. The first one is multiple shadow clone technique. The second one is the multiplicative detonator. The third. Looking at the series of forbidden techniques, the second Hokage appears very frequently. Akabane fell silent. Although I knew this beforehand, I still couldn't help but admire it when I actually saw it. I always felt that this book was specially made for Tobirama Senju by the first Hokage. Besides his techniques, there are some that belong to the first Hokage and others. For example, the complete sealing of the corpse demons was recorded because the cost was too high. In addition, there are 8 forbidden techniques. The contents were completely sealed, but Akabane could roughly guess what was on it. The 8 gates forbidden technique was clearly a way to open the 8 gates, but it was probably just a preliminary idea and was sealed before it could be implemented. The second generation master is really amazing. Akabane sighed and indicated that he had finished reading. Hiruzen Sarutobi put it away and left it on the table without touching it. Instead, he sat down and said, "Remember your promise." "Please rest assured, I will always remember." Akabane kept nodding. "Remember? Humph, you sometimes act recklessly. You should occasionally consider my situation." The third generation said helplessly. "That's what you're teaching." He seemed to be listening intently. "Hope so." The third Hokage added, "When you get back, submit a ninjutsu report and clearly explain the principles behind the ninjutsu." "Huh? Why don't you just write it yourself? You're not that clueless. You are the original creator, so what's the point of me writing it? Besides, your technique is very suitable and useful in war. I hope you can write it down as soon as possible so I can promote it as appropriate." Now there's no way to slack off. Akabane sighed, waved goodbye, and prepared to go back to sleep. Nothing is more important than catching up on sleep, no matter how big the problem is. The third generation couldn't stop him. He had already said everything, so there was no point in staying any longer. Besides, he still had to deal with the sealing scroll, so he didn't have time to play games with the little fox. After Akabane left, he closed the door and then secretly sealed the sealing scroll in another place. He then returned to his desk and opened the comic book. Orochimaru, oh dear. The third generation sighed deeply, feeling utterly melancholy. Seeing the manga makes him worry about Orochimaru, partly because he values Orochimaru too much, and partly. Beside him was another scroll. It records Orochimaru's recent whereabouts and his contact and cooperation with Danzo. If my most valued disciple eventually betrays Konoha, then I, as a teacher, will have truly failed miserably. The third generation stroked the page of the comic, his emotions very complicated. If things continue to deteriorate, the events depicted in the comics might not be impossible. Therefore, he began to wonder if he really understood Orochimaru. He used to think he knew enough, but faced with this volume of intelligence, he felt he didn't know enough. Just like before, he didn't even understand what Jiraiya wanted. It seems the third generation knows some things. I wonder what he will choose. As Akabane walked out of the Hokage building, he sighed inwardly. While looking at the sealed scroll, he noticed the small scroll on the table. Intelligence gathered by secret agents is usually recorded on scrolls. Perhaps Orochimaru's secret base in the Land of Rivers has been exposed, or perhaps his laboratory in the Umbu has been discovered. If we're just guessing, the latter is more likely. My head is throbbing again. No, I need to stop thinking about this and get some sleep. Akabane covered his forehead. The continuous use of ninjutsu for a day and a night had pushed his mental capacity to its limit. Just thinking about these things gives me a terrible headache. I can't use my brain anymore. He slowly walked home, desperately wanting to obtain the Flying Thunder God technique at that moment. Unfortunately, it's just a dream for now. Even if the sealed book were unsealed and laid out for him to see, he might not be able to understand it. Only Minato Namikaze has mastered this technique since the second Hokage, because it is extremely complex and difficult to learn. Even sealing techniques were difficult for him, let alone the very complex Flying Thunder God technique. Back home, Akabane didn't even recreate his shadow clone technique before collapsing down and falling asleep immediately. In the shop, Anmai Yunlang counted the money, happily calculating how to divide the profits. The number of people buying comic books hasn't changed much, but the number of people renting comic books has increased exponentially, easily reaching 100 or 200 people a day. This is all money. Brother Yunlang, hasn't Chiyu arrived yet? Tsunade came to visit again. This is her second time visiting the comic shop today.
No, young master has been training these past 2 days, so I don't know the specifics.
Kurama Yunlang gently shook his head.
At the same time, he couldn't help but have some doubts. So many people are looking for Akabane today, and they all seem very excited, as if they want to chat with him.
Training?
Tsunade, with a worried look on her face, nodded slightly and turned to leave.
Even Akabane has suddenly become diligent?
As she pondered this, she came to her senses and found herself unknowingly arriving at the territory of the Kurama clan.
The Kurama clan, never mind, let's go in and take a look. Tsunade followed the normal route, climbing over the wall and then climbing up from below the window. She went outside the window and carefully used a shoji to pry it open. As soon as she pried open the door, she saw Akabane walking in from outside the room wearing a bath towel.
The two looked at each other, and an awkward atmosphere immediately followed. Akabane was silent for a moment, then sat down and said, "Come in first."
Tsunade awkwardly climbed into the room and discovered that Akabane probably really hadn't slept all night.
Akabane had a terrible headache and didn't think twice before speaking. "I was just about to go to sleep."
Is there something important?
"Nothing much, just came to pick up Chinua to go out and have some fun, and also to see how you are doing,"
Tsunade said calmly. Oh, it's nothing, I'm just a little tired because I haven't slept for a day and a night. Akabane wiped his hair. Creating this technique was indeed not easy, but thankfully it's now complete. Tsunade nodded, then opened her mouth as if to speak, but seemed somewhat hesitant to do so.
The two looked at each other for a moment, and finally Tsunade said, "By the way, Grandma might teach Kiyotsuki the sealing technique."
Akabane paused for a moment. Sealing technique. Of the 10 children of the Uzumaki clan, Uzumaki Saigetsu is indeed the most talented. Are you starting to teach her now, planning to make her the next Jinchuriki? He was silent for a moment, then sighed and said, "It's an inescapable fate for the Uzumaki clan. Feel sorry."
Tsunade lowered her head, her heart filled with remorse.
You don't need to apologize.
Lady Mito was the one who least wanted her descendants to become Jinchuriki.
If they're not going to become Jinchuriki, why would Konoha spend so much money to save them? The cooperation between the ninja villages is never just a matter of friendship. This is the truth.
Okay, I'll go downstairs to pick up Chinua first. Although it was a temporary excuse, it was indeed Mito Uzumaki's original words that she wanted to teach sealing techniques. However, according to Mito Uzumaki, it's better to let Kiyotsuki Uzumaki enjoy herself for a while longer, and then train a successor after Mito herself can't keep up and starts to show signs of aging.
Go ahead, remember to use the main entrance. Akabane gave a reminder, lest Tsunade simply open the door to his bedroom and leave. Although Chinua can sense it now. Tsunade nodded, jumped down, and went around to the main entrance.
Akabane lay down, lost in thought.
After a long while, he shook his head slightly, no longer thinking about Uzumaki Kiyotsuki. With Mito Uzumaki's guidance, there is no need to worry about Kyoto's safety in future. As for Kushina. Now, waiting for Kushina will probably take many years.
Not only that, but Konoha originally didn't have 10 Uzumaki clan members coming over, but now 10 children have come to Konoha. This is enough to show that the Uzumaki clan's storyline has been changed to some extent, so whether there will be a character like Uzumaki Kushina in the future is also questionable.
All in all, given the current situation, Uzumaki Saigetsu is the best choice.
At that moment, he heard a faint sound coming from below.
It seems Tsunade came in through the main entrance and led Uzumaki Kiyotsuki away.
Akabane stopped thinking about miscellaneous things and glanced at the system panel and exchange list. In terms of points, I spent 600 points to redeem the Water Dragon Bullet and the Great Waterfall, but I haven't been paying attention to it these past 2 days and my points have skyrocketed by nearly 900. He thought for a moment, then exchanged 15 points of mental energy, thus losing 750 points. At the same time, the mental strength attribute reaches 100 points. The 15-point increase in mental strength hasn't made a difference in my overall power yet, but my previously fatigued mental state has improved considerably.
Chapter 152. His mental strength has reached the initial level of a jonin. Akabane felt somewhat relieved, but after glancing at the price of the next exchange, he immediately felt that the task ahead was arduous and the road ahead was long. The next exchange for a little mental energy would cost as much as 250 points. Chapter 152. His paintings are only sold abroad. Sand Hidden Village. After the Chunin exams, the training in Sunigakure has become even more intense. I have some good news for everyone. We've got our hands on the latest volume of One Piece. Whoever comes in first place in the training competition will receive a copy of the manga. Second through fifth place will get the chance to borrow it. Fifth through 10th place will have their training volume unchanged. The rest of you will have your training doubled for the next 3 days. Sasuke waved the comic book in his hand. He himself hadn't even read the second volume of the comic, and it was sealed with simple text, making it impossible for anyone to see its contents. What? Comics need to be in the top 5? This is outrageous. Lord Suna, could you relax the conditions a bit? The Sand Village genin complained bitterly. There were always 20 or 30 people in the training ground, but only 5 would have the chance to watch the follow-up updates. Except for the top 10, everyone else had to train twice as much. It was practically hellish training. Relax? Sure, you can hold out until the next update and then you'll be able to see the second volume. Sasuke gave a cold laugh, his eyes sweeping over the group, while warning, I advised the top 5 people that they can also lend out their comics, but if we catch them, we'll confiscate their comics and triple their training. What? Several people's expressions changed. They had originally wanted to borrow the book, but with this new regulation, that avenue was now blocked. The price is too high. These are the rules issued by Lord Kazekage. If anyone has any objections, please communicate with Lord Kazekage. A cold smile appeared on Sasuke's face, his true meaning was very clear. If you actually go to the monks, you will undoubtedly be met with a barrage of insults and punishment. The Sand Village, with its harsh environment and scarce resources, is managed far more strictly than Konoha. Therefore, after these words were spoken, no one dared to object anymore. I can open it up and let everyone confirm. After finishing speaking, Sasuke turned 2 pages of the comic book. The first 2 pages were not sealed, and many of the ninjas at the front could see the contents. However, 2 pages later, the comic book is filled with sealed codes. It wouldn't matter if I didn't see it, but after seeing a page or 2 of content, I started to get itchy to read more. Alright everyone, keep up the good work in training. Tomorrow we'll have our first training match at the training ground. Suna put away the comic book and smiled slightly. Then, turned around and left. The group looked at each other in confusion, but soon someone realized what was happening and immediately got back into training. For the sake of the comics. To reduce training. They shouted slogans, and their enthusiasm for training was much higher than before. Suna, who had been observing from the shadows, breathed a long sigh of relief. It seems this method is working quite well. Feeling relaxed, he turned and headed towards Phonying's office building. This kid did all that in Sunigakure, but in the end he just became someone else's tool to motivate his subordinates. Humph. On the street, a man who looked like a commoner from Sunigakure looked away. He started walking and slowly headed towards the Phonying building. After a long period of exhaustion, Akabane slept until the morning of the next day. After indulging in a hearty meal, he had no choice but to go out and visit the comic book store. Young master, you've finally arrived. Is your cultivation finished? Kurama Yunlang had just finished loading the goods onto the shelf when he looked up and saw Akabane walk in. I guess so. How are the comics selling? Have you spoken to Mr. Yamano about it? Akabane asked. I've already spoken to him and told him I'll send the manga over tomorrow. Also, Mr. Yamano asked when One Piece would be updated. He said One Piece is selling well in many places, and he hopes that One Piece can be updated soon. Tomorrow, I'll work overtime today and finish both comics by 1 a.m. each. Akabane answered without hesitation. Yes, but please take care of your health as well. Kurama Yunlang was somewhat worried.
After such a tough training session yesterday, you must be exhausted after only one day of rest.
After all, the physique of a family bloodline limit user. Don't worry, there won't be any problems.
Akabane waved his hand, then left a shadow clone there. Including the ones left at home, there are a total of 2 shadow clones working at the same time. As long as he doesn't fight, his chakra is sufficient to support his daily needs after creating 2 shadow clones. After reaching 100 points of mental strength, his endurance was significantly improved, preventing him from fainting and going into shock due to the fatigue feedback from the shadow clones. Just then, the sound of 3 people's footsteps approached. After walking a few steps, the 3 turned the corner, looked up to ask, and saw Akabane standing at the door.
Huh, you've already finished training?
Lu Ming was taking out a small jar. However, seeing that Akabane was unharmed, he decided to put it back.
Wait a minute. What are you holding? Akabane immediately stopped him.
Our family and the Nara clan specially made these soldier rations, which we originally intended to give to you, but judging from your appearance, you probably don't need them. As Akimichi Kazushige spoke, he stuffed a handful of dried meat into his mouth.
How can you take back what you've already taken out?
Akabane snatched it without any hesitation. The Kurama clan also has its own military rations, but the taste and effects are nowhere near as good as the special version jointly developed by Akimichi and Nara.
How could I possibly have the nerve to say that?
Lu Ming listlessly found a place to sit down, not at all ashamed of his answer.
Soldier ration pills aren't cheap. What have you been up to these past few days? I've been looking for you several times and haven't been able to find you. Akimichi Kazushige asked curiously.
I tested a ninjutsu and trained in the forest all night. When Akabane heard what they said, he remembered something. The 3rd Hokage had asked him to write a report, listing the names and principles of all the ninjutsu. They trained all night the day before yesterday, and the deer in the forest were very restless.
Lu Ming couldn't help but complain.
Yamanaka glanced outside and reminded them, we should go, it's almost time to meet up.
Oh, are we going on a mission today?
Akabane took out the bottle of soldiers' rations again. Judging from their attire, it was clear that this mission was not a simple task of weeding and catching cats in the village, but rather an expedition outside the village.
Class C mission. Akimichi Kazushige didn't go into details because it was classified. Take this bottle back with you, you never know when you might need it.
Akabane thought for a moment and took out the sealing scroll from his pocket. He then formed a hand seal and took out some poison needles. Poison isn't exclusive to Sunigakure, but it has to be admitted that those people use it the best. Akabane thought for a moment and then handed it to the mountain dweller to retrieve. The secret techniques of the mountain clan are very useful, but they do lack a certain degree of lethality in the early stages. I got these poison needles from the Sand Ninja. They can be used when you encounter a tough opponent in battle.
Clear.
Shan Zhongxu nodded gratefully. The poison needles, combined with the Nara clan's shadow imitation technique, can achieve a near 100% hit rate.
Such weapons are indeed very useful to them.
Forget about the soldiers' ration pills, we still have some here. Lu Ming lazily got up, waved, and walked towards the village entrance. Akabane glanced at the pills in his hand, feeling a mix of emotions. The fact that these genin, lower-rank ninja, are starting to take on C-rank positions basically means that the village has begun preparing for war. A storm is brewing in the land of whirlpools. He sighed for a moment, then said to Kurama Unro, I'll be writing a report inside for now.
Remember to knock and let me know when you come in.
Yes. After giving a brief instruction, Akabane entered the lounge, spread a piece of paper on the table, pondered for a moment, and began writing a report. The shadow clone had originally planned to slack off for a while, but when it saw Akabane come in to write his thesis, it had no choice but to pick up its pen and continue writing. Each person had their own clone, and they were working very hard inside the room. But the ninjutsu techniques weren't extensive, and since there were many ideas to develop, it was completed quickly.
When it came to choosing a name, Akabane found himself in a dilemma.
As we all know, the most troublesome thing when playing games is the character ID.
Ninjutsu and IDs are different. Once you choose one, you can't change it. A mirage? An illusion of fog? A mirage of fog? After considering 3 names, Akabane was extremely conflicted. He turned to his clone and asked, "Which one do you think is better?" "Don't ask me, I'm very busy."
The clone refused without hesitation.
Why should he have to choose between these complicated issues? Never mind, let the old man choose. Akabane put away the scroll. Page 146.
The third generation was urging me a lot yesterday morning, so now that it's finished, I might as well send it over.
He felt reassured that the comic shop had a clone. All the way to the foot of the Hokage building. Idiot, bringing this boring stuff again. The familiar roar.
However, judging from his voice, he seemed somewhat embarrassed and angry.
"Teacher, please tell me if this will work. I just want to print the book. Please approve it."
Jiraiya pleaded earnestly. If this kind of work still doesn't pass muster, he really can't think of any other work that can impress his teacher.
"You've passed. Don't bother me again,"
the third generation said angrily.
He embarrassed himself the first time, and if he does it again, will he ever be able to work properly? Really? Jiraiya was overjoyed and rushed out of the office.
Akabane quickly used his transformation technique, turning into a potted plant and hiding in a corner on the first floor. If Jiraiya were to encounter this, he would probably face another entanglement.
Jiraiya was unaware of it. Overjoyed, he paid no attention to his surroundings and ran downstairs to Akabane's comic book shop. After he left the Hokage building, Akabane dispelled his clone. He glanced upstairs, hesitating. The third generation had just finished reading that kind of comic. Was it really okay to go in now?
Smart people tend to show some leniency to their superiors, especially when they themselves orchestrated this situation.
Akabane, carrying the ninjutsu report, planned to come back another day. But as soon as I turned around, "Come up."
His voice was cold and sharp. At the same moment, another member of the Secret Service appeared in front of him, blocking his way out. Akabane braced himself and went upstairs, where he saw the third Hokage elegantly wiping his nose with a piece of paper. "Third Hokage, I have finished writing the report on ninjutsu."
"Put it here."
The third generation calmly crumpled the paper into a ball, then picked up the report and glanced at it.
Then, he couldn't help but ask, "What's the name of the ninjutsu?" I've thought of 3 names, could you help me choose one?"
Akabane said, and then gave the 3 names.
The third generation found it incredibly frustrating. What a terrible name.
He thought for a moment and finally wrote down the third one. Let's call it Mirage of the Mist.
"Yes, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave." Akabane prepared to make a run for it.
Before he could leave, the third Hokage tapped the table and said, "Akaba, you're teaching Jiraiya to draw, so take responsibility for it and stop letting him mess around all day. Please rest assured, sir, his comics will be mainly sold overseas after they are printed."
Akabane solemnly swore his oath. "Well, that's not necessary, but you should be mindful of the impact."
The third generation coughed lightly. If he only sells to foreign countries, he'll have to sneak around using a telescope, which is so inconvenient.
Chapter 153. I've decided to set up a laboratory. Akabane. The teacher agreed. He agreed to let me publish a book and sell manga. Jiraiya was extremely excited.
The teacher is the third Hokage, the most authoritative figure in Konoha.
A manga that gains his approval is bound to be successful. Of course, this is just his opinion.
Akabane's shadow clone was not surprised by the result at all, and even felt that it was a bit late.
Perhaps the third generation had better endurance. On the surface, he appears as calm as a rock, but in reality, he's probably incredibly excited. He thought to himself, "Hey, why don't you at least say something? Shouldn't you give me some praise?"
Jiraiya said smugly.
"Jiraiya, he is."
It's okay, let him continue talking, it won't affect my drawing," the shadow clone said calmly. Jiraiya was stunned for a moment, then realized what was happening, looked him over carefully, and then looked at the drawing board.
"Are you a clone? If it were the real person, they wouldn't be this diligent." Looking at the kid's reluctant expression, you can tell it's a clone. But I shouldn't have only realized it so late.
I went to the Hokage building, and I should have run into you there.
It seems you missed it.
Shadow clones possess the memories of the original body, but the memories of the time spent apart are not immediately shared. Therefore, he can only speculate about the situation at the time through analysis. Jiraiya has made great progress during this time. He racked his brains to recall, and finally remembered the suspicious potted plant.
Hateful. Jiraiya clenched his fist, went out, and headed towards the Hokage building. See, that's how he left.
Otherwise, it would have been too much trouble to explain. The shadow clone shrugged.
Kurama Yunlong's lips twitched, unsure of what to say. Anyway. That's fine, whatever makes you happy. He silently turned around and went back to settle his own accounts. Midway through, the two encountered each other. Akabane looked up and saw Jiraiya.
Thinking about where the other man might have gone after leaving the Hokage building, he immediately understood almost everything.
You've caused me trouble again.
It's just like them, their ability to shift blame is very similar. Yo, good morning Jiraiya, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
How have you been? Akabane greeted him awkwardly. This is not good at all. We met right below the Hokage building, why did they pretend to be potted plants?
Jiraiya said angrily. As you know, I usually stay at home, so it's embarrassing to run into acquaintances on the street.
I usually just pretend I didn't see them.
Akabane gave a perfunctory response without any sincerity. Jiraiya was speechless, and then he was about to take out a comic book from his pocket. No need to take it, I already know from the third generation lord.
Akabane immediately stopped him.
To take out those comics in broad daylight and look at them in front of so many people on the street.
Shame. New?
Jiraiya scratched his head in frustration, feeling a strange sensation, like punching thin air. Well, I'll need someone to deliver the manuscript to the factory later. You can use the excuse of delivering the manuscript to enter the factory and meet the factory manager, Yamano Izumi. But how you convince the factory manager to agree to publish your book is up to you.
Akabane walked forward and spoke quietly to Jiraiya. Aha! Jiraiya nodded repeatedly after hearing this, saying that such an opportunity was enough. Who could refuse such an excellent work? He thought to himself. Okay, if you have nothing else to do, you can go back and draw more. Creating more content all at once will bring you a lot of benefits. Akabane admonished kindly. I see.
That's really a very useful suggestion, I'll write it down.
Jiraiya nodded repeatedly. You can also talk to them about the revenue from the comics.
There are still profits? His eyes lit up, clearly, he hadn't thought of this at all when he was drawing. Of course, you don't have much money, you can't just generate electricity for love.
Akabane shrugged.
Making money from comics is not shameful, especially for someone like Jiraiya who is struggling financially.
Great.
Thinking about it this way, maybe I can go to the public bathhouse a few more times. Jiraiya's eyes lit up, but he then cautiously looked around and only breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that Tsunade was not there. Akabane shook his head slightly. At this time, Jiraiya had not experienced war, and his thoughts and actions were very direct and naive. Indeed, war and hardship spur people to grow. I still have to paint, so I'll go first.
Jiraiya left excitedly, constantly calculating what price to set. Once the book is published, where should we sell it? Akabane had a terrible headache.
In his opinion, the best place for this kind of comic is to harass foreigners and make them addicted to masturbation. But it wasn't banned in the third generation.
Page 147. That's how the problem came to him.
It seems inappropriate to display it directly, but hiding it would be unfair to Jiraiya.
Before I knew it, I was back at the comic book shop. Young master, did you run into Jiraiya? We ran into him.
Akabane nodded, glanced at Kurama Unro, and then his eyes lit up.
What's causing my headache? This kind of problem can be left to Yunlang to solve. Anyway, the shopkeeper is on my Yunlang, and he's usually the one who suffers the most. Thinking about this, he felt relieved. With his ninjutsu thesis resolved, Akabane has some free time now. Updating 2 books simultaneously is quite a challenge. So after lunch, he stayed home and helped draw the later parts of One Piece. The One Piece update was completed by evening. But while he was at the comic shop delivering an update, he encountered an uninvited guest at the door. Ninjas of the Ambu. Grown-ups. I understand, wait a moment. Akabane's expression was solemn. It had been almost a week since Danzo left Konoha, and the time was about right. He handed the comic to Kurama Unro, and then followed the ANBU ninja. Before even reaching the ANBU base, after leaving the village, Akabane asked first, "What's going on?" A ninja reports that Lord Danzo has returned. "Are you injured?" Akabane's expression was solemn. Although Sunagakure is considered the weakest of the 5 great villages, its strength is still considerable. It would be far too risky for Danzo to infiltrate alone. One of his eyes was seriously injured and poisoned. Fortunately, we had prepared medical personnel in advance, so his life was not in danger, but the eye may not be saved. Anan immediately relayed the information to Akabane. This intelligence was just obtained, but it takes at least half a day to get here from the border, so this is intelligence from this morning. Is the Sand Village giving chase? Akabane's expression was solemn. We arranged for people to confuse them, and Lord Danzo quickly activated the base after entering the Land of Rivers, so Sunagakure did not continue to pursue them. Onron explained. Akabane quickened his pace and followed him into the Ambu. The Secret Service was already in a frenzy, and no one would notice him even if he came in, as everyone was busy processing information. Upon arriving at the office, Akabane immediately began to examine everything. The information above was similar to what had been said before, but in the intelligence coming from the Land of Wind, he noticed an important point. The second Kazekage did not participate in the pursuit. Could it be that Danzo killed the second Hokage? Akabane was horrified. If he killed the second Hokage, Sunagakure would definitely stab him in the back for revenge. How could he possibly fight back in Yuzushiogakure then? Give me all the intelligence coming from the Land of Wind, including the ones that just arrived. Akaba, what's going on? The 3rd generation also arrived, their faces solemn. He received some information from the Secret Service, but the specifics were unclear. The teacher is safe now, but the problem is that he fell into a coma as soon as he returned, and we know nothing about what happened in Sunagakure. Akabane had a terrible headache. Even with the entire Secret Service handling intelligence, there simply weren't enough people left at headquarters, with most of them sent to the border. The intelligence that had just arrived from the Land of Wind was immediately given by the 3rd Hokage. You look at the processed intelligence, and I'll look at the unanalyzed intelligence. Yes. The two quickly processed and categorized the items. After a short while, Akabane put together all the processed information. The teacher broke into the Wind Shadow building and forcibly took the research diary of the second Wind Shadow. The second Kazekage may be injured. The 3rd generation's expression was solemn. The fact that they were able to obtain information from the Kazekage and severely injure him makes Konoha the most suspicious village no matter how you look at it. If the damage is severe enough, Sunagakure will lose its ability to attack. Akabane thought for a moment. The second Kazekage of Sunagakure did not die in the First Shinobi World War, but the 3rd Kazekage took over not long after the war. Judging from this, the second Kazekage was seriously injured. If that's the case, with me in charge, Sunagakure won't dare to make a move. The 3rd generation breathed a long sigh of relief. During the First War, Sunagakure itself lost a significant amount of its high-end combat power. Now that the second Kazekage is severely injured, if he cannot recover to the extent that he was injured, Sunagakure will lose its ability to attack. He sat in the chair and carefully reviewed the intelligence that Akabane was in charge of. Afterwards, the 3rd Hokage was completely relieved. It's good that there were medical personnel, otherwise, with such injuries, even if the injury had continued to worsen, Danzo would have lost his fighting ability.
If it's a one-for-one exchange, it also means that Konoha will be unable to provide any assistance to the land of whirlpools.
Looking at it this way, I can go back and rest now. Wait, I need to tell you about Orochimaru.
The third generation waved his hand, urging him to sit down again.
Akabane was taken aback. Could it be that the third Hokage knew about his relationship with Orochimaru? He thought about it and decided to sit down. During this time you've been in charge of the Anbu, have you discovered anything about Orochimaru?
I don't quite understand what you mean, but I can't move freely in the Dark Division.
Akabane speaks the truth.
These are all pieces of information that the third generation might have access to, so there's no need to hide anything. The third Hokage nodded and then said, Orochimaru is cooperating with the Anbu and has a small laboratory.
Well,
I don't think there's anything wrong with him wanting to study ninjutsu. Akabane deliberately paused for a moment before expressing his opinion.
Researching ninjutsu is permissible within the rules, so I've decided to set up a laboratory for Orochimaru. The third generation said calmly, I'd like to hear your opinion on this. As for the laboratory, you don't necessarily have to stick to Orochimaru.
The laboratory can be used by any ninja who wants to develop ninjutsu, and a reward system can be established for developing ninjutsu. At this point, Akabane thought of another issue and immediately added, if a ninja has a mature idea but lacks funds, they can first write a proposal and the village can provide some financial support.
After hearing what he said, all three generations were stunned.
These ideas are so complete that there is almost nothing to add.
Chapter 154 Not Practicing? Your comic is gone. The three generations fell into deep thought.
Based on his understanding of Akabane, he knew that the thing the kid was proposing must be beneficial to him, otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered to bring it up.
Yes, too lazy to mention it.
Upon closer reflection, a sudden thought struck him. Among the newly created ninjutsu this year, Chidori, Mirage of Mist, and Illusory Game are all related to Akabane.
This doesn't even include Orochimaru's side.
Because Orochimaru was conducting research in the Anbu, the third Hokage lacked a certain understanding of him, but it's safe to assume he also had some of Akabane's ideas. After thinking about it this way, he understood.
Ahem, Lord Third Generation, what's wrong? You've made a lot of money from comics, so you're probably not eligible to apply, right?
The third generation coughed and said.
What do you mean by that? Do I look like someone who would be interested in using such methods?
Akabane remained unmoved. He didn't really care about money, but his original intention was to use research as a pretext to obtain some secret information. But then I thought again, he might not have the time to study these things.
Why waste time on underhanded tactics when you could be updating your comics more often? At least you can earn points from comics.
Of course.
This doesn't mean he's given up. If he can't do it himself, he can ask Orochimaru or Jiraiya to do it. Funding and data will be shared, and we can make money in the same way. This kind of laboratory would be useful to Konoha.
I'll go back and discuss it with the others, and try to get it done as soon as possible.
The third generation got up and walked outside.
Having clarified the situation regarding Danzo's safety in the laboratory, he naturally saw no need to linger any longer.
After the third generation left, Akabane pressed a button and called over an ANBU member.
He remembered this member of the Secret Service.
At the comic convention, Nito Uzumaki called him Oxygen.
Abure Motone was a jonin, but now Akabane was in charge of the Anbu, so when he walked into the office, he immediately knelt down, Sir.
At the latest, Lord Danzo will definitely be back in the village by tomorrow. Akabane got up and tidied up the things on the table. Yes, but what about the Dark Division? You'll keep the secret operations running on your own during this time. You know better than I do about it, so I won't interfere. He's not really the head of the Secret Service, so why would he stay any longer after he's done his job? Yes. Gone. Page 148. Akabane waved and opened the door to leave. Abure Motone called someone over and asked him to lead the way for Akabane.
After Akabane left, he seemed somewhat dazed. Akabane seems to have done nothing these past few days, but he has been very accurate in issuing orders and resolving key issues.
such as this time. Without Akabane's orders to send numerous medical personnel to the border to wait, Danzo might not have received immediate treatment even if he had returned. I don't understand, you strange brat. Yunui-Gen muttered to herself, then shook her head slightly before sitting down at her desk. He pondered for a moment, then picked up his pen and began writing a report on the period of time. As the second in command of the Yambu, he should have been in charge of the Yambu when Danzo was away. The fact that Akabane was sent here this time was purely at Danzo's insistence. Simply put, it's like an exam. What exactly the significance of passing the exam was, perhaps only Danzo himself knew. Stepping out of the Yambu headquarters, Akabane took a deep breath. The dark side is full of caves and prisons, with terrible air quality. Living in such a place all the time, I feel like I'd go crazy sooner or later. Huh, a clone. As Akabane stepped out the door, he suddenly sensed that one of his clones had disappeared. With his chakra reserves, his shadow clones could easily last a whole day without him having to use them. Their disappearance now must mean they encountered some kind of problem. After a period of fatigue, the memories gradually seeped into my mind. Is it finished? From chapters 51 to 55, the most important part of the story is Orochimaru placing a curse seal on Sasuke, followed by the arrival of 3 members of the Sound Village. However, in chapter 55, the massacre of Sasuke's clan is truly revealed through Sasuke's memories. The next volume can be said to have laid the foundation for the direction of the plot. However, the reason for disabling the clone was to seek Akabane's opinion on whether to send the comic over overnight. The specifics need to be traced back to Jiraiya. You're finally back. Tell me your address. Going now? Akabane arrived at the comic book store and saw Jiraiya fully armed, carrying a thick art book in his hand. How much of this is drawn? At a glance, it's at least 10 chapters thick. Of course, I can't wait to show them my masterpiece. The thought of his comics being sold to various countries made Jiraiya so excited that he couldn't sleep. Akabane remained silent for a second. He was thinking about how to describe the route, since he didn't have a map and there was no navigation in the world. Furthermore, even if there were a map, Jiraiya probably wouldn't be able to understand it. As for the introduction to illusion magic, too much trouble. Akabane glanced at Kurama Unro. Young master, we don't have enough manpower today, and apart from a few people, none of us know where the factory is. Anma Yunlang was in a difficult position. If someone could make the trip, there would be no need for Akabane to come back. All right. Akabane simply dispelled his shadow clone and took the person in the room with him as well. Then, he created shadow clones again. The factory sent my clone over, but I'll prepare the publicity materials for tomorrow myself. He prefers to draw by hand rather than walk. Moreover, the preparation work is not difficult, the main problem is what kind of gimmick to create. The extermination of a clan cannot be written about. While such a headline might be sensational, displaying it so openly on the street would likely cause an uproar among the Uchiha clan today. If Uchiha Genkai really intends to make a big move, then everything must proceed gradually and according to plan. Let's use Sakura as the title for the promotion. He thought about it for a long time. This volume had too much explosive content. Since that's the case, we might as well let the plot reveal itself, and the title doesn't matter. Based on Izumi Yamano and his team's usual printing capabilities, the comic should be delivered by tomorrow afternoon at the latest. We need to find a way to contact Uchiha Genkai. Akabane pondered for a moment, and realized that his best way to contact her was through Baku. However, we still need to consult with DDCMS to discuss the specifics of how to proceed. He quickly arranged the Naruto promotional banners and posters, then closed the door to the lounge and used the summoning jutsu to summon Dreamweaver. I've been summoned again? The little Baku appeared from the psychic spell, with a comic book pressed under its paw. It was a little confused when it appeared, but then its small eyes immediately looked around in alarm, as if afraid that Tsunade would jump out from somewhere. Don't look anymore, it's not here. Akabane slapped its head in annoyance. This thing is even more cowardly than him, it seems it won't be able to contribute in bayonet fighting in the future. Oh, that's alright. The little tapir squatted down on its hind legs and continued reading. I called you out to ask what your requirements are for using dreams? Akabane's first thought was that it was a dream. If we could bring Uchiha Genkai into the dream world, we wouldn't need to meet him in person, and the risks would be greatly reduced. The little tapir looked up, seemingly deep in thought. It thought for a long time before finally saying, "It seems so." Just one simple sentence, is that enough? The word sounds unreliable. Maybe. A bead of sweat appeared on Dreamweaver's forehead. It knew its answer was unreliable, so it immediately added, "It's not my fault. I didn't have the chance to use many of my abilities before. Give it a try, but remember not to make the dream too far-fetched." Akabane repeatedly gave instructions. Words like "it seems" or "maybe" are not enough to make him trust you much. It would be too embarrassing if the dream opened the wrong person. But who am I using it on? Dreamweaver is confused. It doesn't use this ability to enter dreams very often, especially remote dream entry, which it has hardly used since childhood. I will tell you. After Akabane finished speaking, he took out a pen and paper and began to draw. Before long, the illusion was successful. The genjutsu depicts the Uchiha clan's situation, as well as Uchiha Genkai's appearance. As long as the little dreamcatcher can keep a distance and allow the other party to enter the dream, it will be fine. Of course. Akabane himself had to go along. That night, he left a clone at home. Then, the man and the beast stealthily followed the road until they reached the outer street where the Uchiha clan was located. Before long, Dreamweaver began searching for the sensor. Its perception is quite good, even from this distance, it can still sense the situation inside the Uchiha clan. Not long after, the dream came true. But in his dream, Akabane looked from afar and realized that it was Uchiha Ryo's father. That's the limit. I'm deciphering dreams, she said weakly. Akabane was silent for a moment, but then he thought that Uchiha-en was probably on the same path as Uchiha Genkai, otherwise his son wouldn't have become a traitor at such a young age, right? Uchiha-en was very alert, he sensed that something was wrong with this dream. After entering the dream, he activated his Sharingan. Although he couldn't break the spell immediately, he could sense that there was a chakra causing trouble within his body. Tomorrow's manga update will include a storyline related to the Uchiha clan. After he finished speaking, the dream disappeared. Outside the Uchiha clan compound, Akabane stared blankly at his summoned beast. I've reached my limit, don't blame me. Dreamweaver protests its injustice. It was indeed the first time it had been used, and the fact that it was used successfully and that it identified a useful target is quite good. You'll have to practice when you get back. Akabane was incredibly annoyed, this mental strength was far too weak. Oh right, I remember now. My clan has a technique that allows us to communicate with the master of our contract through our spiritual power, Jiming said with delight. Do you know? Actually, there's no need to ask, he already knows the answer. Sure enough, the little tapir shook its nose, looking completely innocent. Fine. Akabane patted its head and said, remember to learn more secret techniques when you get back, or I won't call you out again if I don't need them. No, I'm very useful. There aren't many dream devourers as talented as me in the clan. Dreamweaver quickly tried to explain, trying to make herself known. That's the truth. Danzo, for example, couldn't even speak, let alone possess illusionary abilities. For now, Akabane is quite satisfied with it, but in actual use, it is extremely unreliable. Judging from this, you're just too lazy. Go back and write down all the secret techniques and abilities of your clan. I'll pick a few for you to practice first. Chapter 155. It's one thing for shadow clones to inherit parts of the original personality, but even spirit beasts are like this. Can't we just be idle and lazy in peace? Does it have to be this way? Not practicing? What if your comics are gone? Akabane threatened simply. I'll practice. Chapter 155. Take control of the root's future. You didn't know where he was, yet you unknowingly fell into an illusion? Uchiha Genkai's expression was solemn.
I was sleeping when I was suddenly pulled into the illusion. I only had to say one sentence before the illusion ended.
Uchiha-in was still completely bewildered.
He was inexplicably pulled into an illusion, and then disappeared in the blink of an eye after saying just one sentence.
It just doesn't have a beginning or an end. What did he say? Tomorrow's comic will include a storyline related to the Uchiha clan. Uchiha-in answered.
As for the specific plot details, he hung up before he could ask the other party.
I understand. Upon hearing this, Uchiha Genkai instantly understood. He nodded slightly and quickly considered what to do next. Chief, hesitation only leads to more trouble. We've come this far and can't stop now.
Uchiha Genkai knew what this clansman wanted to say, so he interrupted him before he could finish speaking.
It's time to end the chaos within the family. Yes. Uchiha-in lowered his head.
The comic is just a figment of imagination, but it has to be said that it could very well be the future of their family.
To survive, change is necessary.
Either resist to the end or leave Konoha directly. Otherwise, they should integrate, let go of the stubborn pride in the Uchiha's heart, and completely become a part of Konoha.
Of course.
Choosing to integrate also requires the willingness of Konoha's higher-ups to accept it. The fact that the third generation has not taken any action so far is enough to show that they have tacitly accepted this outcome, and the fact that Danzo is not in the clan will make these people a little bolder.
Basically, everything is foolproof.
After thinking it over, Uchiha Genkai gradually calmed down.
Uchiha-in did not go back immediately.
Instead, he seemed somewhat lost and thoughtful, sitting in the clan leader's courtyard for a long time until it was almost bedtime before leaving.
A storm is brewing. He sighed softly, his heart heavy. Night. A group of people hurried back to Konoha.
Lord Danzo, let's go to the hospital first for further treatment, otherwise your health.
No, let's go back to the Dark Division first. Medical matters will be handled there.
They took advantage of the darkness to detour to the location of the Secret Service, and no one noticed them.
Early the next day, Akabane got up very late. When he arrived at the shop, he prepared to continue working on the updated posters for One Piece. However,
as he approached the shop, he noticed a mark on the side of the door.
This is a marker for the dark area.
If he hadn't been in the Dark Bureau these past few days, reading its internal documents, he would never have recognized the origin of this mark.
Danzo is back?
The fact that the Secret Service left this mark clearly indicates that they want him to make a trip.
You're back, and you still have to look for me right away.
I'm so busy, there's practically no time to rest. Akabane sighed inwardly, then created a shadow clone to handle the situation here, while he himself had to go report to the Umbu. Although he was curious about Danzo's injuries, he figured there was nothing life-threatening about him, otherwise there would be no reason for him to go to the Umbu instead of the hospital. When he arrived at the base, Yunui-gen had already been waiting for him. Therefore, Akabane had a clear path to Danzo's restroom without any obstacles.
Go inside, the adults are waiting inside. After finishing his speech, the ANBU formed hand seals and instantly disappeared. Without temporary authority, they've all become disrespectful. Akabane thought to himself, but he still had to obediently open the door himself. Danzo's residence, unusually, had a small window cut into the mountainside, thus receiving some of the little sunlight the base could get. He lay on the chair, quietly facing the beam of sunlight, yet the overall image appeared even more eerie and gloomy. Teacher, I'm relieved to see that you are safe and sound. Akabane is respectful. Stop flattering me. Danzo spoke coldly, turning his chair to face Akabane directly. From his expression, it was impossible to tell whether Akabane was happy or angry. After returning from his trip to Sunagakure, this guy became even more unpredictable and impossible to understand. Not only that, when he looked up, he saw that Danzo's face was wrapped in bandages, and his appearance was very similar to that of someone who had acquired the Sharingan in later generations, but at this time he was still very young. How are you feeling? Thanks to the medical team you sent in advance, I only lost one eye, but the second Kazekage is in a worse state than me. Danzo spoke of it casually, as if he himself was not the one who was injured. Do you died? Akabane was very curious.
The chances of him dying are slim, but he probably won't even be able to be transformed into a half-puppet.
He can no longer be a ninja. Danzo covered his eyes as he spoke, a sinister smile on his face. Trading one eye for the Kazekage, do you think it's worth it?
Akabane opened his mouth, but then fell silent again. From the current battle situation, exchanging one eye for a new Kage is very worthwhile. Otherwise, Konoha would be caught in a pincer attack and would be unable to provide effective assistance to the Land of Whirlpools. In the long run, however, the Land of Wind will inevitably seek revenge. Of course, even without retaliation, the Land of Wind would still keep its sights on the lands of fire and earth. After thinking for a moment, Akabane replied, Sunigakure will not pose a threat for the next 5 years, so we can focus on dealing with Yuzushiogakure.
Now that you've told me about the situation in Sunigakure, explain to me what's going on with the Uchiha clan? Danzo, his face grim, placed the manga and information about the Uchiha clan on the bed. I suspect that Uchiha Genkai wants to clean up the internal affairs and merge into Konoha. Akabane said.
Danzo remained indifferent, neither agreeing nor disagreeing.
He followed the second Hokage and never had any goodwill towards the Uchiha clan. That's why he was so dissatisfied with Akabane's actions, not to mention that what concerned him wasn't just the Uchiha clan. Danzo then said, I've also received news that Hiruzen is planning to set up a research institute. Was that your idea?
This was the third generation lord's own idea.
Akabane immediately shifted the blame. He gets no benefit from this, so why should he take the blame? Putting everything else aside, your actions have all benefited Konoha, so I'll barely pass you off. Danzo ignored his words.
Based on his understanding of the third Hokage, he knew that the guy would immediately confront Orochimaru when he found out that Orochimaru had colluded with him. He would never have thought that he would set up a laboratory and bring Orochimaru out of the underground into the sunlight. From a broader perspective, this research institute is of great significance to Konoha. Even Sunigakure has developed magnet release, so why should Konoha remain stagnant in ninjutsu?
Another issue is the Uchiha clan.
If they can truly resolve their internal problems and fully integrate into the Konoha community, then.
So what's wrong with accepting it? With Konoha being so vast, how could they possibly fear the Uchiha after they've been seriously injured? After a night's rest, Danzo had a very clear understanding of things. What displeased him was that all the work was done by Akabane, and had nothing to do with him. Akabane didn't quite understand Danzo's meaning, and pondered it in his heart, without immediately answering. After a moment of silence, Danzo said, with war imminent, I have no time to lead you anymore. Besides, you and Tsukumo are already Chunin.
I will arrange for Shursho, the only one who hasn't been promoted, to join the Umbu for training.
Our team is now disbanded. Ah, so fast?
Akabane was somewhat surprised. Disbanding the organization means that he will be working independently from now on, and it's hard to say what his assignments will be.
Shuomo lacks more practical experience, while you. Danzo glanced at him, and couldn't help but twitch his lips.
The words were unspoken, but the meaning was clear.
Too lazy. What do you mean? Akabane was somewhat confused. Did Danzo mean to send him to the Umbu, or did he have some other idea? I want to give you my roots. Danzo said calmly. What? Akabane's eyes widened in surprise. What is a root? Its full name is the Dark Training Department, which later became Danzo's capital for causing trouble and taking the blame.
Now, he has inexplicably become the leader of the gang.
What is going on? Page 150. Akabane was a little flustered. If things continue to develop this way, he might have to take over the throne of Kage of the Pot. Your technique is more suited to the training of the root. As long as you don't slack off, the root will definitely develop better. Danzo calmly said, in addition, the war in the Land of Whirlpools is being led by the Umbu, and most of the Umbu will be transferred to other positions. You need to take good care of the village's security. This seems like a lot of trouble. Akabane couldn't help but complain in exasperation, but when he met Danzo's gaze, he swallowed the rest of his words. It looks like there's no room for negotiation. you know about the root base.
As for the manpower issue, I will inform all the tribes and have them send people over soon.
Am I supervising a bunch of freshmen? Akabane immediately understood, and felt even more uncomfortable. Who are the most difficult people to manage? Newborn.
They all have no self-awareness and think they're incredibly capable. Not only are they causing trouble, but they're also incredibly annoying. Managing these people would probably require creating multiple clones of yourself.
But in the comics. So complicated. Akabane sighed softly.
If he had to choose between the two jobs, he would rather draw comics. Let the clone manage the roots from now on.
If there are no problems, you can leave now. Danzo said calmly.
Yes, teacher, please take care of yourself.
Akabane wouldn't have any more questions. Asking one more question would only make things worse. He'd better just make a quick getaway.
He was somewhat dazed after leaving the Dark Division. This development was somewhat unexpected and not quite what he had imagined.
On the way back to the comic book store, Akabane was absent-minded. He was thinking about the root problem. Danzo's character hasn't deteriorated to the point of being untrustworthy yet.
Since we've entrusted the root to him, we should indeed give it to him. Furthermore, judging from Danzo's words, it's highly likely that the elders of Root will be going to the front lines, leaving only a few behind, along with a bunch of new recruits. Thinking about it this way, Gen is at most a new training base, and the probability of him taking over as Guiying is not high.
From now on, I'll just be a little busier. Akabane comforted himself. He left the Umbu and had just arrived in Konoha when he saw Orochimaru waiting at the crossroads. Orochimaru, you are. Kibakuin, thank you.
Upon meeting, Orochimaru bowed at a 90-degree angle, showing his sincerity. A smile he couldn't hide appeared on his face. He looked very happy and satisfied.
What good thing happened?
Akabane had a vague idea of what was going on, but having just clashed with Danzo, he was too lazy to think about it anymore. My teacher is going to set up a research institute, so I won't have to do my research in secret anymore.
Orochimaru was extremely grateful. Although the teacher didn't mention it, I know you must have played a part in this. Why? Akabane was puzzled. Had he become so outstanding that he could no longer hide it? Only you could come up with such a brilliant idea, and a way to make a profit from it. Chapter 156. Don't underestimate art. That's a hurtful thing to say. Akabane was exasperated. What did he mean by profiting from this?
Sorry, I accidentally said what was on my mind. Orochimaru seems to be in a good mood, and his speech is lively and energetic, unlike his previous quiet demeanor. Although the two had exchanged information, Danzo's threat to them still existed. Now that the research institute is complete, he no longer needs to be mindful of Danzo's feelings. All research can be brought to the forefront. Of course. If Orochimaru were interested in the impure world reincarnation technique, the chances of his proposal being approved by the third Hokage's side would be almost zero. But this time the efficiency was really high. In the past, it would probably have been a lot of nonsense, or we would have had to wait for Danzo to return. After all, in terms of rank, Danzo is now the Hokage's assistant, and these orders cannot be issued without him. But this time the third Hokage was very decisive, and held an internal meeting without waiting for Danzo to arrive. The meeting concluded quickly and a decision was made. Akabane took a few steps, thought for a moment, and then said, I just went to see my teacher. My snake has noticed. Orochimaru was not surprised. He deployed several spirit snakes as sentries, thus gaining advanced knowledge of the movements of the Dark Division and Akabane. He has already relinquished control of the lab, and I will take over the rest of the business. Akabane said in a low voice. Is it your responsibility to take the root of the problem? Orochimaru was somewhat surprised. How could he not know about root when he was cooperating with Danzo? That was Danzo's treasure. The new root is equivalent to the training department. Akabane explained. Orochimaru pondered for a moment, then said with some concern, be careful not to end up doing all the work for someone else. Yes, we definitely need to train our own people, so I'd like to ask you to procure some equipment.
The arm guard of the sky-slicing wave? Orochimaru pondered for a moment, then immediately understood what Akabane meant.
It would be best if all three types of equipment could be developed. The principles behind them are not difficult. Orochimaru's ninjutsu and creativity play a very important role in training and developing tools, human beings. Putting everything else aside, the Sound Ninja 3-piece set is enough to serve as a formidable special combat device. With software modifications, it might even be possible to create a bunch of ninja-style special forces soldiers.
Okay, this doesn't require a new lab. I should be able to figure it out in the next few days. Orochimaru actually had a well-developed idea about the three pieces of equipment used by the Sound Ninja in the manga.
He had previously thought this thing was rather useless and had little research value, so he gave up the idea of perfecting it. Since Akabane needs it, he doesn't mind spending a little more time. It doesn't matter if we get it done sooner, since everyone can use the equipment anyway, and we might even be able to mention it to the teacher.
Akabane said nonchalantly. The handover of root will have to wait until the land of whirlpools is completely at war.
Judging from Danzo's intentions, once the land of wind is finished, he can immediately begin planning for the land of whirlpools. Therefore, if you calculate the time, it won't be too long.
That makes sense. Any other ideas? Sound waves can also be detected.
If you can develop ninjutsu in this area, you will have made a great contribution before the battle even begins.
Echolocation.
The strongest technique of the Mist Ninja is silent assassination.
However, under echolocation, nothing can be hidden. Sound wave detection? Orochimaru became interested and excitedly grabbed Akabane's hand. Tell me quickly, what's the principle behind it? When sound encounters an obstacle, it returns and forms an echo.
Assuming that the speed of sound is constant, we can calculate what obstacle is ahead based on the time it takes for us to hear the echo.
Akabane said simply.
Orochimaru was initially very excited, but later his expression gradually turned sour.
Even if this technique is created, who can master it?
Even setting aside whether an echo can be heard, just the fact that one can deduce the other party's location from the echo requires a great deal of calculation. In that time, the white eyes, the parasites, and so on would have been investigated and figured out long ago.
After much deliberation, he honestly asked, why do I feel like it's not working? Ninjutsu alone is not very useful. You need to create a ninja tool that can emit and receive sound waves. Then you can just teach others how to use it. Who can withstand the sheer volume of primitive technology? Humans aren't bats, they can't hear sound waves and instantly know the other person's location.
Although I don't know the specifics of how to do it, I have a general understanding of the principles.
Orochimaru nodded heavily.
I used to think sound waves were simple, but now that I listen to them, I realize that there are countless intricacies involved, and it's impossible to figure them out in just a few days.
Okay, then, do you want to go to the lab? Akabane gave a frantic hint. So much work to do, go and study it. Akabane-kun, do you want to come with us?
No, the comic will be updated this afternoon, and I have to go back to manage things at the store.
Akabane immediately explained.
His experience researching the Mirage of Mist with Orochimaru made him deeply aware of the terror of a mad scientist. As for research, he can just be a master of empty talk.
In that case, you should go back first.
I'll test the sound wave detection you mentioned after I've developed 3 types of ninja tools.
Orochimaru, unaware of anything amiss, enthusiastically went to the laboratory instead. Akabane breathed a sigh of relief.
If we really work with Orochimaru on this research, who knows when we'll be able to create the light and sound ninja set.
After all, it's easy to talk about, but actually manufacturing it requires careful consideration of the size and number of sound holes. It's a complicated and meticulous process. If you're not careful, your true nature as a poor student will be exposed. Page 151. As for the shop. In reality, Akabane didn't have much work to do.
The restaurant had its own cooking makers, so he should have finished dealing with everything by now. However, if war breaks out in the future, he probably won't have much time to paint. So, just in case, he didn't rest in the afternoon. He also went to the comic shop to boost morale and draw with his clone. The two clones each drew a different character, one drew One Piece, and the other drew Naruto. By the end of the morning, each of them had completed updating 2 chapters of the next volume. Originally, it would have been quite difficult for them to finish the update before the afternoon on their own, but Akabane himself joined in.
Where is your young master? In the afternoon, Yamano Izumi arrived with his caravan. Shoo!
Kurama Yunlang made a gesture, then glanced inside the room. Then, he took out 2 comic books from underneath. Young master is asleep.
These are the next updates for the 2 comic books. So fast? Shan Yechuan Hong was startled.
In the past, Akabane would take at least 2 days to print each book, but this time he only printed 200 copies of each book, and the update was already due.
Fast updates are good, but the workers can't keep up with the constant overtime.
Young master acted a bit strangely today. He probably won't be so diligent next time.
Kurama Yunlang said in a low voice. Yamano Izumi nodded in understanding and instructed his men to help unload the goods. After finishing his business, he sat down and asked in a low voice, "Is something going to happen recently?" Kurama Yunlang looked completely bewildered. What do you mean? It's nothing. Shan Yechuan Hong touched his nose in annoyance.
He assumed the other party was a member of a family and would know some inside information, but it seemed that Anma Yunlang knew nothing at all.
Since that's the case, he couldn't reveal anything more. Have there been any changes in your factory's orders recently?
At that moment, a voice came from inside. Then, Akabane came out of the house, his face full of weariness. He had already become alert when Yamano Izumi came over, but he didn't come out until Yamano Izumi brought up that topic.
Yes. Shan Yechuan Hong nodded.
As the factory manager, he knows the factory's orders best, and recently, orders for ninja tools to Konoha and Yuzushiogakure have increased significantly.
It is clear that war is likely to follow. Yes, you guessed right. There may be other orders coming up, and I hope to cooperate with you then.
Akabane didn't say it explicitly, but the meaning behind his words was obvious.
Shan Yechuan Hong already understood. He pondered for a moment and said, I don't know what Mr. Akabane wants to make. I'm afraid we can't do anything too intricate. Don't worry, you can definitely do it.
Of the 3 pieces of equipment used by the Sound Ninja, the most difficult to manufacture is undoubtedly the arm armor worn by Tosu in the manga. The size and number of holes in that arm armor need to be strictly controlled, otherwise it won't be able to produce the same effect as in the comics.
In comparison, the sky slicing wave is simple and brutal.
As long as the hole error is not too large, it can produce good results.
That's fine, just let me know when you're ready to do it. Yamano Izumi nodded without hesitation.
Recently, the factory has reduced its external orders, but it has more than enough manpower, and they can also earn a lot of extra money.
Why not?
After discussing the collaboration, Akabane felt relieved and pulled up a chair to sit down. But seeing them loading the goods, he suddenly thought of another question. Mr. Yamano, Jiraiya's books.
Sorry, we were too busy this time and were unable to complete many updates. Shan Yechuan Hong said apologetically. Any goods brought over from Konoha? Akabane asked curiously. Yes, there are, but only 10 copies. Yamano Izumi said that someone should bring over the 10 volumes.
Because of the limited quantity and the special subject matter, he took special care to store it separately.
10 books are more than enough.
Akabane couldn't help but give him a thumbs up. He would only worry if he took too much. I feel a little uneasy keeping this kind of book in my own shop, but I can't refuse to keep it in my own shop because of my friend's kindness.
Yamano Izumi's team moved the goods quickly, and in no time all several hundred books were moved down. It was still early, so Akabane didn't intend to invite them to stay for dinner.
He simply exchanged a few pleasantries and then saw them off. Then, they returned to the store. I put one on the bookshelf, and if someone notices it and wants to buy it, you take another one from under the cabinet for them. As Akabane spoke, he handed him the remaining books. Kurama Yunlang understood, but he took it and counted it. There were indeed 9 books in total. He glanced at the book title again, Intimate Desert, by Jiraiya.
It doesn't look good. Anma Yunlang pursed his lips and put the 9 books under the counter.
At this moment, Akabane had already entered the restroom. The book Intimate Desert wasn't on the bookshelf, but a minute later, Akabane opened the door and casually tossed the book into a corner of the shelf.
Trash book. Don't underestimate art.
After reading only a fraction of what he said, Akabane felt no respect whatsoever. The story was cliched and the plot was dull. Although the female lead was nice and quite alluring, her wise-sounding lines were like a bucket of cold water poured over his head. For someone who had studied the strengths of many schools of thought, books of this level offered no enjoyment whatsoever.
Chapter 157 Extermination of the Clan? The Uchiha's Resolve. Has the comic arrived? Not long after the comic was put on the shelves, Uchiha Ryo followed suit.
Even Kurama Yunlang could tell that this guy had scouted the place and followed him here, but he didn't expose him. He calmly glossed over these details and then pointed to the bookshelf, saying, "Both of the comics have been updated, and there are also some other works by other authors.
You can choose for yourself." Other people?
Uchiha Rin was taken aback for a moment, but then didn't take it to heart. "I mainly came here to buy Naruto, but One Piece has been updated too.
I'll buy another One Piece volume." He went into the store and began to pick and choose.
Although the Uchiha clan was quite wealthy, he had no income of his own, so it would be ideal if he could happen to pick a comic book with a poster.
However,
Uchiha Ryo picked through a few books and suddenly noticed a comic book lying haphazardly in the corner. He walked over, picked it up, and glanced at it.
Intimate Desert? What book is this? I don't think I've seen it before.
He read most of the comics in the store, but this one was the only one he had never read before, and after looking around, he realized it was the only one in the store.
Could it be a unique copy? Uchiha Ryo took a deep breath, feeling that his luck might have turned around. In his excitement, he didn't notice the author's name above. That's it.
He carried the books to the front of the stage and took out 3,100 taels of silver. The clan chief instructed them to buy more Naruto manga, as well as 10 One Piece volumes and 1 Ika Desert volume.
This is a work by a new painter. Upon seeing the Intimate Desert, Kurama Yunlang couldn't help but offer a reminder. It's okay, I'll buy it. Uchiha Ryo paid the money, packed up the book, and left the store.
Kurama Yunlang paused for a moment, but ultimately said nothing.
If a customer wants to buy it, can he insist that it's an art book and refuse to let them buy it? Everyone has their own preferences, so let it be. Kurama Yunlang shook his head slightly and placed another copy of Intimate Desert back in its original position. As soon as Uchiha Ryo got his hands on the manga, he rushed to the clan's territory.
Upon seeing Uchiha Genkai, he shoved the package onto the table and said respectfully, "Clan leader, I bought 20 copies of Naruto as you suggested, and some others as well."
Very good, let me see.
Uchiha Genkai opened the package and casually picked up a book. However, after glancing at it, he coughed lightly and put the comic book behind him.
"Chieftain, what happened to that book?"
Uchiha Ryo was somewhat curious. He only saw that it was a rare copy of Affection for the Desert and immediately snatched it away without actually reading the contents.
"Nothing."
Uchiha Genkai didn't answer, but instead carefully looked at the title and took out the Naruto manga from the pile. He turned the pages one by one. The preceding plot was meaningless to him. Uchiha Genkai only cared about plots related to the Uchiha clan.
Until the very last episode. Chapter 55, page 1. It was because I lacked power that the Uchiha clan was wiped out, and everyone was killed. Each line of dialogue instantly reveals the truth that no other members of the Uchiha clan have appeared so far. All dead. Page 152. In an instant, the image of that person that Sasuke had been talking about flashed into Uchiha Genkai's mind. Who's that person? An outsider, or a member of the Uchiha clan? Maybe both. Yuan Hai thought to himself. The Uchiha clan has never been a peaceful clan, and as the clan head, he knows this better than anyone else. Chieftain, what's the situation up there?
Uchiha Ryo found it rather strange.
Do you remember what I said before? Are you referring to the storyline in the manga where the Uchiha clan might have been wiped out?
He picked up a copy of Naruto, flipped to the back, and then killed, their entire clan wiped out. It was just one page of content, but it had a tremendous impact on him.
Uchiha Ryo was stunned. Although he already knew, he still found it hard to accept when he saw the plot, and even had the urge to beat up Akabane. Take the comic to your tribe to see. But, is this really okay?
Uchiha Ryo was shocked and puzzled. This kind of content makes everyone realize how many people want to beat up Akabane, and some extreme individuals might even do something more terrible. At his age, he could already imagine such a scene, yet Uchiha Genkai still nodded.
Uchiha Ryo didn't understand, but he had to obey the clan leader's orders. He took 20 copies and left the clan chief's house to distribute the comics to the clan members. He bought 20 copies? Akabane nodded slightly after hearing this. Judging by the timeline, Uchiha Rin should have already returned home. Looks like there's going to be a good show.
He pondered for a moment, greeted Kurama Unro, and then left the comic book shop.
A show like this is not to be missed.
Since it's impossible to go to the Uchiha side to cheer them on, we can only watch the live broadcast. A short while later, he arrived at the Hokage building. The third generation was somewhat surprised to see him and said in astonishment, "You actually came to find me on your own initiative.
Tell me, what's the matter?" The manga update just arrived, and the Uchiha clan bought 20 copies.
Akabane smiled and made a telescope gesture.
The implication is clear enough.
After a moment of silence, the third generation said, "Close the door."
Okay.
Akabane immediately closed the door, then sat down contentedly, waiting for the third generation to rub the crystal ball.
Hiruzen Sarutobi took out a crystal ball.
He formed hand seals and mobilized his chakra for a long time, and finally an image appeared on the crystal ball. This perspective should be from Uchiha Genkai, and the scene is Uchiha Genkai's home.
Chieftain, the drawing on there is too much. This is an insult to the Uchiha clan, we can no longer tolerate it. If we keep tolerating this, these little puppies will think we're easy to bully.
We must teach them a lesson and let them know that the Uchiha are not to be trifled with. A large crowd gathered, and the whole place was in an uproar.
Anyone who didn't know better would have thought the Uchiha were about to rebel. Uchiha Genkai's eyes swept across the entire room.
He gave no reply, but simply let them continue their commotion. After about 10 minutes, the room gradually quieted down.
Yuan Hai, you are the clan leader. What do you want to say? Should we just pretend this never happened, or what? An elder asked. What do you mean? Uchiha Genkai did not give a direct answer. I don't think things are that simple. This might be Danzo testing us.
We need to show our strength, otherwise they will only push their luck.
The elder said. Pushing your luck? I disagree with your opinion. Uchiha N stepped forward. Oh.
Many people looked over, some with unfriendly eyes.
You think that compromising will only allow the other party to take advantage of you, but have you ever thought about the Uchiha's current situation? Uchiha N coldly said, back when Madara was alive, we couldn't even defeat the Senju clan. What do we have to fight them with now? The lives of our entire clan? They dare.
The elder's eyes widened, and the three tomos swirled around.
However, Uchiha N confronted him head-on, and both awakened their Sharingan.
Both of them possessed the three tomo jade, and neither was weaker than the other. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down.
Clan leader, I think both the elders and Yen have a point.
The extermination of the clan is not just a plot in a manga, but a real sword hanging over the heads of the Uchiha, which could fall at any time.
We must do something. Another Jonin stepped forward and spoke.
So, what are your thoughts? Uchiha Genkai glanced around and asked calmly.
However, no one answered.
The group was arguing noisily, and each of them had their own ideas, but when it came to actually speaking, they all chickened out instantly.
Clan leader, I think we should take the initiative to integrate into Konoha and let Konoha see the sincerity of the Uchiha clan. Uchiha-en spoke first. How dare you? You are insulting our family bloodline.
Many elders were so angry that their hair stood on end, wishing they could tear Uchiha-en apart.
Insult? Is our bloodline so noble? Uchiha-en gave a cold laugh. You.
The elders were trembling with rage, they all stood up, their eyes bloodshot.
Uchiha-en showed no fear whatsoever.
From the moment he accepted the mission, he was prepared to make a sacrifice.
For the sake of the family.
He silently shouted in his heart.
He then stepped forward and said sternly, "You old fogies, do you understand that times have changed?" An elder suddenly stood up and angrily rebuked, "Do you intend to follow Jing's example and become a traitor to the family?"
At this moment, the entire room fell silent.
Uchiha Kagami, once a taboo name in the clan that could not be mentioned, is now being brought up again. Most people have mixed feelings. They couldn't agree with Kagami's approach, but if they went against the Hokage's lineage, could the Uchiha really gain any advantage? I'm afraid not. Why did this page of the manga cause such a strong reaction within the Uchiha clan? Because the ending of the manga touched a raw nerve with the Uchiha clan.
Everyone knows that going against the Hokage's faction is pointless, but they can't let go of their pride and compromise. Just like the demeanor of these elders, the Uchiha bloodline is noble. The Uchiha are descendants of the meritorious founders of the village. But as descendants of meritorious officials, the Senju clan no longer competes or fights for power, so what can the Uchiha clan do? Of course. Another concern for many is whether Konoha will accept the compromise. This is also a problem. At this moment, Yuan Hai, who had been sitting silently for a long time, spoke up, "Elder, when did my brother become the traitor you mentioned?"
Isn't that right?
He abandoned the pride of the Uchiha clan, embraced Tobirama Senju's ways, and even died a shameful death in a war while helping the Hokage lineage. He was a traitor.
The elder sneered. I see. Then who else agrees with the elder's idea? For a moment, no one answered. But gradually, some people stood up, including several elders. Yuan Hai, why don't we leave Konoha and live in other countries? Yes, let's leave. With our Uchiha abilities, we can definitely create our own village after leaving Konoha. Many clan ninjas accepted this, including many guards. Uchiha Genkai looked around, closed his eyes, and said, "Is that what you're thinking?" That's right, the Uchiha clan must change, things can't go on like this. Then, do as you say. If everyone agrees to leave Konoha, we can start making preparations when we get back. It would be best to leave tonight to avoid any unforeseen complications. Yes. The ninjas who stood up left excitedly, and soon some more got up and followed them. The Uchiha clan has taken a fork in the road. Chapter 158 Escape the area, kill without mercy. If Yuan Hai is truly determined, I will certainly not treat the Uchiha unfairly. The third generation said it with absolute certainty. For Konoha, the complete integration of the Uchiha clan is definitely a good thing. The powerful bloodline limit, fire release techniques, and numerous secret techniques can elevate Konoha's strength to a whole new level. Page 153. If that's the case, what reason is there to turn them away? The three generations of disciples were all disciples of Tobirama Senju, and their ideas were largely the same, but there were also subtle differences. He wouldn't mind involving the Uchiha clan in the village's management if they could be trusted. Of course, forget about becoming Hokage. My lord, it's no use telling me this. You should say this to the Uchiha. Akabane stood up. After the main event, everything that followed was predictable, so there wasn't much to see. The third generation took a puff of his cigarette but did not answer. He believed that Uchiha Genkai understood his meaning. If he had disagreed, he would have intervened long ago to maintain the stability of the village. However, seeing Akabane's actions, he tapped the table with his pipe and said, "Where are you going?" "Go back." After Akabane finished answering, he immediately sensed something was wrong. This situation. Are we going to be conscripted? Sit down. The third generation pointed to the area in front.
Akabane felt a pang of regret. It seemed he was about to ruin himself just to watch the spectacle. He sat down at the table and waited for the three generations to continue speaking.
I heard from Danzo that Root has been handed over to you for command?
Yes, but I haven't taken over yet. Akabane quickly explained, lest the matter fall on his own shoulders. The third Hokage narrowed his eyes slightly, then sighed helplessly and said, "Why are you in such a hurry?"
I wouldn't dare entrust such an important matter to a brat like you. Yes, please continue. Akabane nodded quickly.
Not only the Uchiha need to be prepared tonight, but we also need to prepare our manpower in case anyone escapes.
The third generation stopped there, but the meaning behind their words couldn't be clearer. Anyone who escapes the area will be killed without mercy. Do you want me to?
You will participate in the defense tonight, using illusion magic to assist others. The third Hokage took out a map of Konoha and marked the locations of iconic buildings such as the Hokage Building, the Uchiha clan, and the Forest of Death. He also drew all the escape or attack routes of the Uchiha clan. The different colors of the lines likely represent the probability that the Uchiha clan will follow this path.
It's quite comprehensive. Not only that.
Based on Akabane's understanding of the age of ink marks and drawings, this drawing is at least a year old. Based on the timeline, this image likely already existed when Tobirama Senju and Kagami Uchiha died in battle. Those old bastards, not one of them is a good person. Akabane thought to himself. The third Hokage glanced at him, seemingly guessing what he was thinking, and explained, "The map was made by the second Hokage, this is a copy."
I understand, please continue.
Akabane made a gesture. "Anyway, the second Hokage has already gone to the Immortal Mountain to sell dried tofu.
I can't possibly resurrect him with Edo Tensei and ask him anything.
Whatever you say goes." The third generation remained silent for a moment, then spread out the blueprints and pointed to a red route.
You'll guard this path with the others, and when you see anyone escape. I see. Akabane took a deep breath.
The entire perimeter of Konoha was covered by a dense net, so that not only a living person, but even an insect would have to ask the Aburame clan for permission to crawl out.
Alright, go and get some rest.
The third generation waved their hands, finished explaining the matter, and said that keeping this lazybones around was just an eyesore. It would be better to let Akabane go back now to recover his strength and work hard tonight. On his way back to the comic book store, Akabane was still thinking about what happened tonight. The Uchiha who were leaving were definitely doomed, and he wasn't going to pity them. Instead, he was thinking about how to profit from it. Judging from the physical tests of the Vortex clan, the blood of those with bloodline limits can indeed bring a certain reduction in points. If I could get the Uchiha's eyes, I might be able to get a great deal on Sharingan. Of course. He has to consider the costs involved. If the price for the discount is to make those eyes disappear directly, then you can't make a move. What a treasure trove! Akabane sighed softly, and before he knew it, he was back at the shop. The Uchiha clan was wiped out? The plot is too exciting, the Uchiha gang is probably going to explode. Boss, you'd better run away quickly, or the guards will come and tear your shop down. As soon as he arrived outside the shop, he heard many people discussing something, and quite a few of them were half admonishing and half joking with Anma Yunlang. Akabane turned the corner and saw the people talking. Most of these people were ordinary people or genin from Konoha, and they had great respect for the guards. What is the role of the security detail? To put it nicely, they are protecting the villagers of Konoha and ensuring Konoha's stability and peace. To put it bluntly, they are Konoha's version of the urban management army. If what was seen through the telescope technique is true, and Uchiha Genkai couldn't control himself, a group of people came out to teach him a lesson, the result might be exactly what these villagers are saying. The stall was overturned. Akabane hesitated, wondering if they should go out with so many people. What if I get chased by celebrities when I go out? The troubles of being a celebrity. He thought for a moment and finally went out. However, it was different from what he had imagined. When the villagers who had been gathered in front of the shop saw Akabane, they all ran away in a flash. This is very embarrassing. Akabane raised his hand and left it in midair. Then he stiffly touched his hair and walked to the shop in a nonchalant manner.
Young master, you're back? Kurama Yunlang was a little embarrassed.
He pointed in the direction the group had fled and explained, "They were just chatting casually, don't take it to heart. It's nothing, comics are comics, don't take it too personally."
Akabane said it casually. He then looked around warily and asked in a low voice, "Has Jiraiya been here before?"
Kurama didn't answer, but instead carefully pointed inside the house. A child was inside, holding a comic book and seemingly walking around casually. After a period of training, Jiraiya's transformation technique became quite proficient. But appearances can change, but temperament cannot be hidden. That guy kept glancing at the intimate desert scene in the corner, looking extremely interested but too afraid to look openly. In short, he was incredibly lewd.
Farewell. Upon seeing Jiraiya, Akabane turned to leave. Jiraiya couldn't keep up the act any longer and immediately jumped out of the house, saying, "Akabane, why did you put my manga in the corner?" First of all, this was Yunlong's idea. Secondly, the store layout was Yunlong's responsibility, not mine.
Finally, your comics have actually been sold. In fact, someone has already bought them.
Akabane's words stunned Kurama Unro. His idea? Wasn't it Akabane who gave the order?
People are sitting in the shop when pots fall from the sky. He opened his mouth, his mind racing with thoughts, but in the end he didn't dare to tell the truth and could only silently take the blame for his boss. Jiraiya angrily said, "Brother Yunlang, you said you couldn't make the decision, but you were lying to me all along.
Your painting is too unique. Considering the store's image, I have to make some adjustments,"
Kurama Yunlang said, forcing himself to speak.
Jiraiya was almost in tears.
He had come to the store full of enthusiasm, hoping to see if he could sell his manga, but after searching the entire store, he finally spotted that lonely manga in the corner. The worst part is that the cover is facing down. "Jiraiya, what Yunlang said makes sense, but I can make the decision to add a few more spots for you."
As Akabane spoke, he gave Kurama Unro a wink.
Kurama Yunlang wanted to cry, but he could only follow Akabane's advice and silently took out 3 copies of Ika Desert from below. Akabane then placed the 3 books next to the one that had been there before.
3 times more than before, isn't that noticeable? Akabane pointed to the corner. Jiraiya looked at the 4 books from the outside and immediately spotted them.
A happy smile appeared on his face. Great, you're really something. I used to carry one of these books on my back and put it on the bookshelf. If I didn't know the contents and specifically come to look at it, I would never have seen it.
That's different now.
When the 4 books are placed together, you can at least immediately see that they are different from the ones around them. However, in reality, unless you specifically come looking for this book, you would never notice that there is a rather unusual comic book here. After all, there are just too many books in the comic book store, and this bookshelf is in an inconspicuous location. Once your comic print run picks up, I'll clear out the entire bookshelf for you.
That's the most I can do.
After all, Yunlang usually manages the shop, so I shouldn't be getting involved.
Akabane said righteously. Yeah.
Jiraiya felt inexplicably that something was wrong, but he couldn't quite put his finger on it.
Anma Yunlang felt bitter inside, but couldn't express his feelings. Akabane did all the good and bad things by himself, but what can you do when Akabane is your boss?
At that moment, he realized the darkness of the workplace. However, to be fair, although Akabane restricted the placement of Ika Desert in comic book stores, he had other caravans contact him through Azumi Yamano. The businessmen were very envious and readily agreed, figuring that sales wouldn't be too bad.
Jiraiya didn't care much about money.
For him, selling comics at Akabane shop gave him a sense of success and fame.
If it becomes a huge hit, it will prove itself even more.
However, while art paintings may not be banned, it would be quite difficult for them to become mainstream.
Page 154.
Akabane's words successfully persuaded Jiraiya. He stopped worrying about the comics placement and instead felt happy that he had made a profit.
After all, without Akabane's shop, who would know that he drew such a book? At least sell 1 unit now.
So he left happily, probably to go and brag to others.
Young master, Could you please explain things clearly before trying to trick me next time? Well, I'll try my best.
Akabane chuckled dryly, then used the excuse of going back to rest to slip away in an instant.
Ma Yun Lang did not persist.
He updated 2 books at the same time today, and there were so many customers. He hadn't even finished settling his accounts yet, so he didn't have time to worry about these things.
Moreover, if it weren't for this method, given Jiraiya's personality, he probably would have placed that inappropriate book for children in the most conspicuous place.
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask them why the Uchiha clan was wiped out.
Chapter 159 Mangekyo Sharingan. The night was dark.
The Uchiha clan members packed their belongings. Under the order, many elderly, weak, women and children also put on ninja outfits and prepared to set off. The training grounds of the clan were packed with people, with Uchiha Genkai standing alone at the very front.
Chieftain, when shall we depart? An elder asked.
Uchiha Genkai did not answer, his eyes scanning the entire room. After several minutes, he slowly spoke. A long time ago, our clan came to Konoha. This place is not only the home of the Senju lineage, but also the home we depend on for survival.
Once we leave, we can never come back. Chief, what's wrong with you?
The elders, who had made up their minds to leave Konoha, were dumbfounded. They had finally managed to persuade everyone to leave, so why were they bringing up these things again at this crucial moment?
This is not a scam. I just want to ask, has everyone really made up their minds to leave Konoha? Uchiha Genkai's tone was solemn.
Many of those present were his blood relatives, and he was unwilling to use force against his own kind unless absolutely necessary.
Yuan Hai, do you still want to back out at this point? An elder sensed something was wrong and shouted angrily, then hurriedly said, if you don't want to leave, we will. Don't listen to his nonsense, we'll leave through the Death Forest route. After saying that, the elders took the lead and headed out of the clan's territory. Many people gripped their kunai tightly and followed the footsteps.
Only a small number of people remained where they were, somewhat hesitant. Most of these people had families with young and old members, so it wasn't easy for them to leave. They originally felt that their families had to leave, so they followed the crowd and went with them. But now it seems the clan leader has a different meaning.
Although the circumstances are different, I can understand Madara's feelings when he left his family.
Uchiha Genkai's voice was deep but filled with killing intent, because you are all so incredibly stupid.
If you were going to leave, why did you stay in the first place? With Madara as their leader, wouldn't the Uchiha clan become even stronger?
Once is enough when it comes to making a foolish decision, but the same group of people made the most foolish decision twice in a row during their limited lives.
Yuan Hai, what are you doing?
The elders were terrified and furious. They all turned around and looked at Uchiha Genkai. They saw a pair of blood-red eyes.
Sharingan.
As the 3 tomo swirled, Uchiha Genkai was filled with rage and sorrow, yet his aura continued to surge.
You. There's only one thing you're right about, the family needs to change. If we want to survive, we must get rid of the stupid parasites.
Beneath the cold voice lay boundless killing intent. The next second, dozens of shurikens and kunai flew out from the shadows, covering a wide area of those who were preparing to leave the village.
Earth escape, earth flow wall.
The earthen wall rose, blocking the incoming projectiles, however.
Earth escape Huanquan marsh. But collapsed terrain forced them to dodge. Yuan Hai, how could you be so ruthless as to help Sarutobi and his gang turn against their own people?
The elders roared in anger. They never expected that Uchiha Genkai, who had always been lenient in his methods and had a weak personality, would suddenly turn against them at such a crucial moment. Most importantly, so many people were helping him. Under the influence of the Yellow Spring swamp, the earthen wall disappeared completely. The group trying to escape were exposed and re-entered the range of the hidden weapons.
We must break through. If we drag this out, the people from Konoha will come.
Break through the Death Forest.
Go! With things having come to this point, the Uchiha clan members who were preparing to leave Konoha dared not delay and immediately turned to flee. However, Jahong Hell. Wide-ranging magical spell, the Shackles technique.
Everyone seemed to be frozen in place by iron nails, unable to move at all, while flames rose from beneath their feet.
Everyone who was frozen in place activated their Sharingan. Those who dare to betray are naturally powerful.
Many of these people are three-tomo powerhouses, with strength comparable to Jonin. However, they were horrified to find that they could not break free at all.
Impossible. Why can't I break free?
The elders couldn't believe that the shackles technique was just an illusion, which could be completely broken or deflected with the Sharingan.
In reality, no one can crack it. Why? The chieftain's eyes.
The agonizing screams were not just the result of illusions, but also of real shuriken and kunai.
Some people have come to their senses. The reason it cannot be broken is that
This is not a simple illusion.
Mangekyo Sharingan. It's a kaleidoscope.
A group of over 100 people were simultaneously frozen in place by an illusion.
That's the power of a kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope. They hadn't seen it for so many years, and everyone was shocked to see it again. It represents the strongest power of the Uchiha clan.
Uchiha Genkai covered his eyes as he simultaneously cast spells on so many people. His eyes were bleeding profusely, but those hit by the spells also suffered heavy casualties.
He covered his eyes in pain.
At this moment, the illusion was interrupted.
However, how ruthless, Uchiha Genkai, you are so vicious. I won't let you go, kill. Flames soared into the sky, and amidst screams, a group of people rushed towards Uchiha Genkai. But before they could arrive, Uchiha-en appeared to protect them. Phoenix Immortal Fire Technique.
He failed to awaken the Manjikyu Sharingan, but his mastery of fire release made him effortless against ninjas who had lost their minds. However, not everyone was like them. Most of them waded through the fire and ran out of the village. Leading the way were none other than the elders who were determined to leave.
Chief, we chase them down, we can't let them escape.
Uchiha Genkai covered his eyes, blood seeping from between his fingers.
But this is a village. Why worry about the village now?
Just kill them all, and be careful not to hurt the villagers.
Uchiha Genkai roared. Konoha has already cast its net, just waiting for them to fall into it.
If we die here, at least we won't lose our eyes, but if we escape outside and enter Konoha's encirclement, it's hard to say whether we'll lose our eyes.
Yes. Uchiha-en immediately led his men to follow.
The ninjas who had originally planned to leave but ultimately chose to stay were surprised and terrified. If they had left like the others, they would have ended up like this. They dared not ask questions, dared not leave, and could only stand there trembling.
Revolt? The person in front of me is the only one in recent years to awaken the kaleidoscope. Even the elders were no match for them, so how could they dare to oppose them?
Uchiha Genkai turned around and barely opened his eyes. He looked at the clansman who had chosen to stay and said in a low voice, "Leaving Konoha will only lead to the same fate as the Uzumaki clan. I hope you will not hate me."
The Uzumaki clan? Everyone fell silent.
Most people didn't know what had happened in the land of whirlpools, but they believed that the clan leader would give them an answer later.
What's going on with the Uchiha clan? It seems like a fight has broken out. Want to take a look? With such a large-scale battle, the villagers could certainly hear the commotion.
However, just as some people went out to peek at the battle, secret agents immediately appeared.
Page 155. There's been fighting over there. Please don't go out tonight. The crazed Uchiha clan doesn't care if you're a villager or not.
Even the Umbu wouldn't dare to appear alone, let alone these villagers.
With these secret agents maintaining order, no one in the village dared to come out and join the fun. For this reason, the fleeing elders and clansmen quickly escaped Konoha and reached the outskirts of the Forest of Death.
Their plan was to use the forest as cover to cross over and leave Konoha. However, by the time they arrived, more than half of their tribesmen had already died or been injured.
Uchiha-en and his men showed no mercy, relentlessly pursuing and killing their enemies. Thankfully, we escaped. Once we cross the forest, we'll leave Konoha. Hang in there, everyone. The elder comforted everyone. However, Elder, no. No, not here.
The Jonin, who had activated his Sharingan, was stuttering as he spoke and backed away, but then he heard the sounds of pursuers behind him.
What's the situation?
The elders hold high positions of power, but they have been out of the fight for far too long.
In terms of combat strength, they are even superior to elite Chunin.
Therefore, the Jonin noticed the ambush, but they were completely unaware and instead prepared to move forward into the forest.
The tribesman pulled them back and said bitterly, "We are surrounded." What?
The others were stunned.
At this moment, figures emerged from the woods. Hinata, Aburane, Inakacho.
At a glance, you can see people from almost all the major clans in Konoha.
The leader is Hatake Kazami. Uchiha Teru, you can't escape. Surrender. Kazami Hatake said calmly. Surrender? What a joke.
Uchiha Teru was the eldest elder of the Uchiha clan and the leader of the faction that fled Konoha. He was once an elite Jonin, but that's all in the past. He hasn't fought for several years now, so he'd be lucky to have half of his peak strength.
Then you will only perish here.
Kazami Hatake drew his short sword, his meaning clear, kill.
In an instant, everyone made their move.
Akabane remained hidden in the shadows, thanks to the silent assassination technique he had previously acquired. His ability to conceal his presence and hide his figure was extremely strong. Unless the opponent had exceptionally strong perception or something like the Byakugan, they would not be able to detect his hiding place. The weaker ones were killed earlier. Those who have made it this far are all Jonin. Although Akabane's mental strength reached 100 points, it would still be difficult for him to defeat a Jonin from the Uchiha clan who possessed the Sharingan. His job was to stay put and then quietly strike someone else. The battle on both sides was fierce, especially that of Kazami Hatake. His sword seemed slow, but at the moment of attack, it suddenly flashed with lightning and became extremely fast. The Sharingan possesses exceptional insight, enabling it to perceive the trajectory of sword techniques.
But what's the use of seeing it?
Even if you can see the trajectory, your body can't keep up with the knife's sudden acceleration.
The next second, a head flew into the air.
Of course. The most terrifying thing is that Kazami Hatake is incredibly fast. He can kill someone and disappear in the blink of an eye. When it reappeared, it was another lightning-fast strike. One strike might not be fatal, but if he misses, he immediately leaves and moves on to the next one. Coupled with the characteristics of lightning release chakra, no one can hurt him. Although the Uchiha were very strong and injured many ANBU and other clan ninjas, they were unable to defeat Hatake Kazami.
So strong. This was the first time Akabane had seen Kazami Hatake make a move.
If he were to encounter a ninja like that, he probably wouldn't even have time to run away, let alone use Genjutsu or Ninjutsu.
Chapter 160 Uchiha Bleeding Night. Sir, should we continue the pursuit? Not far away, Uchiha arrived with a group of subordinates.
These ninjas were the very group who were unwilling to leave Konoha from the very beginning, and most of them were trusted confidants cultivated by Uchiha Genkai over a long period of time. Without this family fortune, Uchiha Genkai wouldn't have dared to do this, otherwise, he, the clan head, would have been the one to die.
Uchiha stopped and shook his head, saying, "Let's wait until they're done. It's nighttime now, and if we rashly join the battle, we'll easily be mistaken for those clansmen and killed along with them." He paused here, looked back, and said, "There's no problem here. Leave 2 small teams behind, the rest, go back and clean up the bodies of your tribesmen." In the end, Uchiha couldn't help but feel somewhat downcast.
The feeling of raising a knife against one's own people is not pleasant, especially since he was one of the planners, making him feel even more guilty.
Then you.
I'll keep an eye on this area and bring them back to the family when it's over. After a moment's hesitation, most of the others withdrew, leaving only 8 people behind.
The screams continued unabated.
Uchiha took a deep breath, banishing the guilt in his heart, and then said heavily to the others, "Bloodshed is necessary for change.
Their deaths will bring about the rebirth of the Uchiha." "My lord, I understand."
Others responded, but the atmosphere remained somber.
After all, they are all from the same clan.
Surrounded by numerous forces, the already remnant troops, who were being hunted down, gradually lost their ability to hold their ground.
How can one family stand against an entire village?
Uchiha Tara felt a deep sense of despair, realizing the extent of his own foolishness.
He secretly observed his surroundings.
The tribesmen have already suffered heavy casualties, and it is impossible for them all to escape.
Run! We can't worry about them now.
He formed hand seals, quietly leaving behind a shadow clone, while his main body attempted to escape using earth magic.
The second nature transformation that Uchiha Akira mastered was Earth Attribute.
Unfortunately, halfway through his Earth as a technique for Earth is a type of magic or magic, he discovered that a strange chakra enveloped him. Then, the surrounding soil gradually compressed, and he tried to get out from under the soil but could not move.
Clack clack.
Under immense pressure, Uchiha Tara felt as if his bones were about to be crushed.
Earth escape?
He quickly considered the possibility, but upon reflection, he immediately dismissed it.
That chakra was an illusion.
As a former elite jonin, even though he hadn't fought for many years and his body had deteriorated due to old age, he still had a lot of combat experience when he calmed down. He immediately identified the source of the illusion, and then
the five senses control of the Kurama clan. Uchiha Hikaru's expression turned grim.
The best way to break free from the control of the five senses was to fall into a coma, which would allow him to exit the illusion. However, he simply could not bear the consequences of falling into a coma.
The only way to break it is by force.
He focused his mental energy, preparing to forcefully break through the illusion, but then he discovered that the illusion had vanished.
Without any hesitation, Uchiha Hikaru quickly fled.
However, as he made his way through the soil, he saw a magnificent water dragon swooping down towards him. He formed hand seals to use the earth flow barrier to block, but in that instant,
another illusion?
He was slightly startled, but immediately gathered his mental energy and focused his pupil power, trying to forcefully break through. Akabane was unsure whether his mental power combined with the Sharingansai power could break through his illusion, and he didn't want to test it, so he immediately dispelled the illusion. However, even if the illusion is broken, the goal has already been achieved.
Because water release water dragon bullet technique.
The two clones simultaneously formed hand seals, and two water dragons rose up, attacking from the front and back. Under the immense impact, he, who was already injured due to the influence of his five senses, immediately coughed up blood. He threw several shuriken from a distance, then had his shadow clone stab the opponent in the heart with a kunai. Only after confirming the opponent's death did Akabane dispel the shadow clone technique. This place is only a few steps away from the actual battlefield, but a small mound provides cover, making it easy for people to not see the true situation here. He walked over and placed his hands on Uchiha Tara's eyes. I glanced at the points, nothing had changed.
Do we have to pry it out?
Akabane felt a chill run down his spine. The risk of picking it out was too great, and most importantly, it was extremely disgusting. He didn't believe in superstitions and pressed his hands completely to his eyes.
The points remained unchanged, but a new exchange option suddenly appeared below the Sharingan.
Uchiha Bloodline, descendant of Indra's bloodline, can reduce the cost of using the Sharingan and has a chance to awaken it, requires 2,999 points.
Bloodline exchange? Akabane's eyes widened. No wonder a 3, set only costs 1,000 points. Luckily, I'm cautious by nature.
Otherwise, if I had been greedy and exchanged for the Sharingan, I probably would have been tricked into gouging out my own eyes.
However, upon seeing the required points, he fell silent.
I've been working hard these past few days updating, and I've spent some money exchanging for ninjutsu and attributes, so I only have a little over 1,000 left.
Poverty made me realize.
Akabane glanced at it silently, then pondered for a moment before setting his sights on Uchiha Teru. He carefully observed his surroundings, even creating a shadow clone to keep watch, before finally pulling out the kunai. Instantly, blood spurted out. Akabane placed his hand above the wound, his eyes fixed on the panel, and sure enough, his points were dropping little by little. In the end, the wound stopped bleeding.
Page 156. At this moment, he only had a little over 2,300 points left in his Uchiha Bloodline exchange account. A whopping 600 points. However, as the points increased, all the spurted blood was absorbed by Akabane, leaving only the traces of bloodline left on the ground. He thought for a moment, then stepped on the corpse's chest, and blood immediately splattered all over the ground.
Next second, Akabane got up and walked out of the small mound, pretending to look exhausted. By this time, the battle outside had mostly ended, and Kazami Hatake stood aside watching the fight, panting slightly. Such high-speed combat appears to consume a significant amount of resources.
Died? Kazami Hatake, smelling the blood and familiar with the scent of chakra, recognized Akabane without turning around. Yes, I'm chasing Uchiha Hikaru. I wonder if there are any others. Akabane nodded and replied. It's all right, there are other people. Kazami Hatake leaned against a tree, his eyes scanning his surroundings.
Before long, figures returned one after another. Lord Kazami, the 3 rogue ninjas have been dealt with.
4. After reports of the bodies being brought out, many people dragged them out of the woods.
Behind Akabane, an ANBU member dragged out Uchiha Teru's corpse and placed it on the open ground in front. Lord Kazami, there are a total of 34 rogue ninja who fled to this place, and there are 34 corpses now.
The Secret Service reported.
Ah. Kazami Hatake stood up, took a few steps forward, and said to Hamura Uchiha in the distance, Hamura, please verify this.
Thank you, Lord Kazami.
Uchiha-en bowed respectfully, then followed behind to examine the condition of the 34 corpses.
He examined them one by one, and couldn't help but sigh inwardly. It was a terrible scene. Some were unrecognizable, but one could still vaguely make out that they were Uchiha people.
Without the activation of chakra, these eyes revert to their original state, making it impossible to distinguish the corpse from the tomo or the awakened eye.
However, judging from the marks, clothing, and some facial details, these are all members of the tribe.
Uchiha-en found nothing suspicious, so he nodded with relief and said, Thank you all for helping our clan eliminate the traitors. If these rebels had escaped the village, the consequences would have been unimaginable.
It's all right, it's just a convenient deployment. Kazami Hatake uttered nonsense that even he didn't believe, then nodded slightly and turned to leave. After finishing my business, I went home to sleep. 34 corpses? By obtaining the blood of just 3 or 4 of them, one can acquire the Uchiha bloodline for free.
However, the Uchiha clan, having made the drastic decision to cut their own arm, will become a new power in Konoha, with a completely different status than before.
To take action now would be tantamount to provoking a major threat. Let's go. Kazami Hatake said calmly.
Akabane was disappointed. There was still a lot of blood on the ground. If it weren't so conspicuous right now, he would have liked to use earth magic to collect it.
Although the amount isn't large, it's still at least a few hundred points, right?
Unfortunately, they were afraid that it would be too strange for Uchiha Teru's body to have its blood drained, so they didn't dare to take action directly. Now they have no choice but to give up this huge fortune.
Akabane sighed softly and followed with a heavy heart.
The group walked for a while, then dispersed and went home, until only Kazami Hatake and Akabane remained.
Uncle, this is not the way to the Hatake clan. Akabane saw Kazami Hatake turn at the left fork in the road and couldn't help but remind him. Although a group of Uchiha have been eliminated, it's hard to say whether there will be any lunatics left. Also, to prevent you from going back. Kazami Hatake said calmly.
Although he didn't see it, he could guess that Akabane must have done something after killing Uchiha Kaname. After all, a full half-minute had passed between the disappearance of the twin water dragon bullets and Uchiha Kagame's aura and Akabane's return.
Oh dear, Uncle Kazami, what you're saying?
Akabane scratched his head awkwardly.
It's really too difficult to fool the Jonin, especially the Hatake clan. Even the secret police wouldn't dare to make a move, so you should just shut up. Kazami Hatake spoke indifferently.
I'm just curious about what the power in those eyes is.
Akabane explained.
Kazami Hatake escorted Akabane to the Kurama clan's territory, then said in a deep voice, Akabane, no matter how strong your power is, it depends on how you use it. Blindly pursuing the strength of your bloodline will only lead to utter defeat in the end.
I understand, thank you for your guidance.
Akabane felt both helpless and grateful. These words clearly show that Kazami Hatake had no ill intentions towards him, but rather was very willing to mentor and cultivate him. Like Tsukumo, he is a person who is cold on the outside but warm on the inside.
The situation is sensitive tonight, don't go out. After saying that, Kazami Hatake disappeared in a flash. So fast.
Akabane was amazed, but couldn't help but feel a little sentimental. This family's intuition is ridiculously strong, and what's even more terrifying about Kazami Hatake than Tsukumo is that he is mature, shrewd, and experienced. If you consider him an elite jonin who is strong in swordsmanship, taijutsu, and ninjutsu, then the end result is certain death.
Come to think of it, how could someone like that become the head of a clan?
However, there's no way to get the Uchiha blood, the only option is to painfully accumulate points to exchange for it.
He doesn't urgently need the Sharingan right now.
If he could get it for free, he might exchange it for 3 tomo in one go. But if he fails to get it for free, he can only put it aside and look for other opportunities later.
Chapter 161 Sharingan? Don't even think about it, stop. Uchiha brought all the bodies back and displayed them in front of the clan square.
After counting them one by one, he reported to Uchiha Genkai, clan leader, all the defectors are here, without a single one missing.
Thanks for your hard work. Uchiha Genkai nodded, signaling him to step back.
In front of the square, the entire clan was present, and sobs could be heard from time to time. He walked up to the corpses, remained silent for a long time, and then said, "Fellow clansmen, perhaps you think I am hypocritical, ruthless, and heartless, but everything I have done is for the continuation of the clan." Afterwards, Uchiha Genkai walked around and looked up, saying, "The Uzumaki clan, you're all familiar with them, right?"
Hashirama Senju's wife was the princess of the Uzumaki clan.
An old man answered.
That's right.
They are the largest power in the land of whirlpools, and a very powerful clan throughout the entire ninja world.
As you all know, the Uzumaki clan sent 10 children over recently, right? Everyone nodded.
The 10 children of the Uzumaki clan were very low-key, but they were noticed by everyone when they entered the village, so everyone still remembers them. The Uzumaki clan sent people to Konoha for the sake of the continuation of their race. Uchiha Genkai said, because in a few years, their homes, villages, and countries will all be destroyed.
What? How is this possible? Konoha won't help?
Many tribesmen stood up abruptly, looking bewildered and incredulous. Some of the older people were slightly taken aback after hearing this, but then they understood everything when they thought of the abilities of the Uzumaki clan. The common man is not guilty, but he is guilty of carrying a jade.
How can we help?
Our village just went through a great battle and hasn't even had a chance to catch its breath. And the target of the land of whirlpools isn't just 1 or 2 villages, but all the ninja villages outside of Konoha.
Uchiha Genkai sneered, does anyone still think that with our abilities, we can create our own ninja village just by leaving Konoha?
But there was no need to kill so many of our people. An elderly man was in tears. The Uchiha clan has a complicated relationship, and many of these people are his juniors.
Elders, they chose to leave because they don't trust Konoha. Staying will only bring disaster to our clan. Some diseases are incurable and can only be surgically removed.
Uchiha Genkai said decisively. Unbeknownst to him, he had already awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan, his scarlet eyes scanning the entire scene.
Instantly, everyone fell silent. No one dares to object to absolute power.
Moreover, what Uchiha Genkai said was not wrong. In fact, many of them had the blood of their clansmen on their hands.
When the tragedy happened, no one was innocent.
Let's bury him, and while we're at it, send some people to clean the streets.
Yes.
Although it was only a little over 100 people who defected or died, since all of them were ninjas, that number was quite high. Many villagers who heard the noise opened their windows and peeked out, only to be met with a strong, pungent smell of blood. Meanwhile, the rest of the Uchiha clan can be seen whitewashing the situation.
What happened?
Everyone was completely baffled, but dared not go out to ask. They could only suppress their curiosity and force themselves to go to sleep.
Early the next day, Konoha appeared peaceful, and there wasn't a strong smell of blood on the streets. It was all done in one night. The Uchiha are efficient. Akabane woke up unusually early.
He was heartbroken at missing out on the chance to get something for free and couldn't sleep all night.
Without the bloodline enhancement, the Sharingan would have been a huge liability, but with the bloodline.
Although the 3-Tomo Sharingan is still weak compared to the Manjikyu Sharingan, it is quite strong compared to ordinary bloodline limits.
Besides, when Itachi appears, the Manjikyu Sharingan will come. The bold get rich, the timid starve, alas. Akabane walked down the street, his feelings incredibly complex. All the way to the store. He looked up and saw a large crowd gathered in front of the door, frantically grabbing at the comic book. Page 157. What are these people doing here?
Upon seeing Akabane through the crowd, Kurama Yunlang immediately shouted with ecstatic joy, "My young master is here."
Everyone, please step back and don't block the door. In an instant, everyone turned around.
They were just surrounding Kurama Yunlang, but now they've all come over and surrounded Akabane.
What exactly happened to the Uchiha clan last night?
The manga had just reached the point of the Uchiha clan massacre when something happened to them.
Is there something wrong with your manga? Is the village about to undergo a major upheaval?
Akabane listened and looked around, and after a moment, he understood. Most of these people are ordinary people who don't have many ways to get this information, yet they are very curious. They all ran as fast as reporters, arriving even earlier than him.
Akabane, suppressing his discomfort, pondered for a moment and then said, "Is there some misunderstanding? First, I didn't imply anything. Second, I'll just hold back for now. Surrounding me won't help. Aren't you that person's disciple?" Someone whispered. Everyone in Konoha knows who Akabane's teacher is, Danzo, the head of Konoha's Anbu. With that person there, how could they not know? Konoha has been relatively peaceful since the war, so there haven't been any major conflicts. This Uchiha civil war was a pleasant surprise.
In addition, Akabane happened to draw a storyline about the extermination of a clan, so everyone's imaginations ran wild and they all flocked to this topic.
I really don't know what happened last night, so please don't make things difficult for me. Akabane was helpless. While in a sense everyone's speculation is true, he cannot admit it.
After being persuaded by Kurama Unro, everyone gradually dispersed.
The enthusiasm of the onlookers is amazing. Akabane sighed softly and followed Kurama Unro to tidy up the messy shop. Young master, last night.
Internal purge within the Uchiha clan.
The Kurama family had a similar incident before, which resulted in the elimination of 10 elders and many clansmen. Now, only 5 elders remain.
The Uchiha were in a similar situation, only their methods were more ruthless.
Of course.
The two clans were in different situations. The Kurama clan was not secretly targeted by the Hokage's lineage, while the Uchiha clan had a long-standing grudge against the Hokage's lineage.
After a relaxing day, it's time to get back to drawing.
Both manga were originally updated, but compared to the exciting plots and reality in the manga, One Piece, which is still in its early stages, obviously doesn't attract as much attention, so the response has been relatively small in the past 2 days.
However, once the Uchiha craze subsides and the next manga volume is released, the points should surge. Akabane thought to himself, then opened the points panel. The exchange of Uchiha bloodlines is quite remarkable. But it's useless. The Sharingan can't be used openly, so it's better to get something else instead.
After taking a look, he felt that these miscellaneous ninjutsu techniques were not very useful for the time being. With chakra enhancement, the power of Water Dragon Bullet and Great Waterfall technique is already sufficient. Ordinary enemies can be dealt with using genjutsu alone.
Strengthen your physique first.
After thinking it over, I decided to focus on building a solid foundation first. Kazami Hataki's speed last night left him with a psychological trauma. If he were to encounter such an enemy on the battlefield, he would have no way to escape. After figuring it out, he didn't hesitate any longer and put all his points into improving his physical fitness. I accumulated over 1,500 points this morning, which, after redemption, amounted to exactly 30 points of physique. As a result, my physical attributes reached a level close to the top of Chunin rank. After finishing all that, he created 2 shadow clones. Because of the frequent updates, Izumi Yamano won't be delivering today. He might be able to finish one of the updates by tomorrow morning if he works overtime. As things stand, Akabane is more inclined towards Naruto. Just as I finished these trivial chores, a snake crawled in through the window.
Orochimaru?
Akaba, I figured out 2 of the 3 devices, but I still haven't figured out the one for TOS. The snake clone opened its mouth and spoke.
Do you need my help?
Akabane knew very well that he couldn't help, but he still shamelessly pretended to be helpful. The snake clone flicked its tongue. After a moment, it said, "No need, I'm here for something else."
What's up? At this critical juncture, could it be that Danzo is up to something again? Do you think the Sharingan can move?
Although it was a snake clone, Akabane sensed that this guy was definitely excited and eager. The Sharingan is arguably the most famous bloodline limit in the ninja world. No one could resist such temptation, especially a researcher like Orochimaru.
Don't even think about it, resist the urge. Akabane said solemnly. The Uchiha clan is currently in a situation where surrendering would mean losing half the battle. Although they have lost so many elite members, as long as they don't cause trouble, Konoha will definitely protect them in the future.
Therefore, what followed was the honeymoon period between Konoha and the Uchiha clan. Don't forget that besides being the ninja doctor, the 3rd Hokage also had the title of ninja hero. Anyone who reached out to him would have their claws chopped off. Besides, by the time night was over, the Uchiha's body was probably already buried.
To attack a cemetery would truly make one a traitorous ninja. Orochimaru is usually very rational, but the temptation of the Sharingan is too great.
Even though he knows it is very dangerous, he still wants to try it. However, after being persuaded, he can only give up and ask about another topic that he is very interested in.
What is that mark I have in your comic? Cursed seal.
His eyes lit up immediately when he saw that thing. If he hadn't been busy yesterday, and if things hadn't been so unsettled on Akabane's side, he would have come over to ask him already. Akabane thought for a moment and said, "I learned from the Baku that there is a power called natural energy, and some powerful summoning beasts possess this power."
Oh? Orochimaru's tone was somewhat surprised.
Although he signed a contract with Manda, he did not directly learn of the existence of the Holy Land like Jiraiya, and therefore was unaware of the existence of natural energy.
Of course. With the little Moku's absent-mindedness, how could it know so much?
Even if they did have natural energy, they might not be able to remember it.
Orochimaru thought for a moment, then said excitedly, "I see. There are powers in the world other than chakra. By the way, what was the summoned beast that Jiraiya signed again?" "Toad, Mount Mayaboku." Akabane said simply.
"I'll go ask Jiraiya." The little snake quickly slithered out of the window and darted towards the laboratory. "I'm determined to change my fate with technology." Akabane sighed slightly, but Orochimaru couldn't even encounter Yugo's clan now, so his research on the cursed seal seemed to be a long way off. Instead of expecting those things, we should think about Ryuji Cave.
However, upon closer inspection, the rules of Ryuji Cave are quite a pain, far less gentle than those of Mount Mayaboku. Difficult.
Akabane himself got up, preparing to go to the Hatake clan.
Chapter 162 Pinduoduo Points Bargaining. Although he was teammates with Tsukumo, this was Akabane's first time returning to the Hatake clan.
Their family is small, consisting of only a dozen or so households and a martial arts dojo. Before he even entered the martial arts arena, he heard the sound of swords clashing.
"Go inside."
Tsukumo and Yora were dueling in the middle, while several children from the Hatake clan, who looked to be around 7 or 8 years old, sat around the dojo.
Hearing the noise, Kazami Hatake turned around and saw Akabane. His face instantly showed surprise. This lazybones actually crawled out of its nest. "Hey, dual swords." Akabane walked towards Kazami Hatake, and the children on the road made way for him. Ding ding ding.
The two short swords danced swiftly like the wind. Although each strike was not particularly powerful, they prevented Yi Wu from launching any offensive.
The advantage of dual swords lies in their formidable offensive capabilities.
Moonlight Knight Dance excels in agility, but pales in comparison to the equally agile Tsukumo. After several more exchanges, he was exhausted and was the first to be defeated. At this moment, Kazami Hatake said calmly, "Get to the point." "Uncle Kazami, I'd like to ask you, how can I increase my speed?" Akabane rubbed his hands awkwardly.
"Practice more, run more."
"I'm annoyed," said Kazami Hatake.
"Is there a more unique method?"
"Practice?
Everyone knows that."
If Akabane were willing to put in the hard work to train, he wouldn't be looking for shortcuts here.
Kazami Hatake turned his head and looked at him as if he were an idiot.
He beckoned to a child next to him and asked, "Ijuin, tell him how you usually practice." "Run 20 laps around Konoha in the morning, climb the mountain 100 times in the morning, swing your sword 500 times in the afternoon, and run 50 laps around Konoha again in the evening," the child next to me said in a clear, crisp voice. The more Akabane listened, the stiffer his expression became. He glanced down and saw that the child was at most 5 or 6 years old, probably just starting out at ninja school. Such children end up receiving such brutal training.
Page 158.
Kazutoshi Hatake then said in a low voice, "Because of my poor physical condition, this is the minimum amount of training I need."
"I see.
Even if you're cursing inside, you still have to keep smiling on your face. This training volume is terrifying." Noticing the children's gaze, Akabane's smile became somewhat stiff.
Kazami Hatake said calmly, "There are no shortcuts in taijutsu.
Even geniuses achieve their success through hard work."
"Big brother, will you train with us like Yi Wu?"
Kazutoshi Hatake asked curiously.
"No, I didn't, don't misunderstand."
Akabane immediately shook his head in denial. "Training with these kids, only to find that I, being the oldest, am the first to give up, would be incredibly embarrassing."
"Ah." Kazami Hatake gave a cold laugh.
Based on his understanding of Akabane, expecting this guy to be diligent was practically impossible.
"Uncle Kazami, may I borrow some of the less important swordsmanship manuals from your clan?" Akabane said.
"What will you use to exchange it?"
Kazami Hatake did not refuse.
Those were his family's sword techniques. Although they were not particularly valuable, they still could not be lent to others for free.
"Silent assassination technique," Akabane said in a low voice.
"Okay?"
Kazami Hatake was somewhat surprised.
This is a signature technique of Kirigakure, rarely known to outsiders.
How could Akabane know it?
"I previously learned the fog concealment technique and created a fog mirage through it. In the process, I figured out the principle behind their silent assassination technique,"
Akabane explained. After thinking for a moment, Kazami Hatake nodded and agreed, "Okay."
Silent assassination is not a sword technique, but it is invaluable, especially when facing mist ninja. Familiarity with silent assassination techniques greatly increases their chances of survival.
"You train yourselves." Kazami Hatake got up and led Akabane to the clan's library.
Upon reaching the upper floor of the martial arts hall, he turned a corner and found a small room. He formed hand seals to undo the spell on the door before unlocking it with a key. After opening the door, Kazami Hatake turned on the light, revealing rows of bookshelves.
Akabane took a deep breath.
The foundation of a family is often not just about money and power, but also about the accumulation of bloodlines and knowledge. With just this room full of books, the Hatake family truly deserves its title as a family.
You are free to look at the books in the first and second rows.
In addition, the books here are not just swordsmanship books, but also some reasonable methods for warriors from the Warring States period to train their bodies and strengthen their physiques.
You can take a look at those as well," Kazami Hatake said calmly.
In his view, these books were more important than swordsmanship to the Kurama clan.
"Thank you, Uncle Kazami. I think swordsmanship is something that can be learned by analogy," Akabane said. "What are some ways to train the body and improve physical fitness?" All you need is a system.
The training those people downstairs were doing had deeply frightened him, given his personality and all that training.
Whatever. Kazami Hatake was too lazy to offer any advice. People's personalities are like that, many things cannot be forced.
Besides, Akabane isn't a martial arts practitioner, and his body isn't that weak, so it's fine for him not to practice those unorthodox methods.
Of course, the reasons are not that simple.
Akabane went to the Hatake clan for two reasons: firstly, to inquire about shortcuts to improve speed, and secondly, to borrow swordsmanship books.
Blood can reduce the bloodline score, so can swordsmanship books reduce the swordsmanship score?
There aren't many sword skills on the exchange list.
One of them is Zabuza's decapitation sword technique.
The other is the three-sword style. The decapitation sword technique is very crude, only rated C, and requires a special weapon, so there's no need to exchange for it. Akabane wanted to lower the score for the three-sword style.
The three-sword style requires 300 points, placing it between B and A ranks. After all, it only involves the technique of using three swords and does not include sword moves such as onigiri or hayakuchi paboka.
He looked around the bookshelf and casually picked up a book on swordsmanship.
Basic swordsmanship.
Turning the pages, the initial content was about the origins of martial arts, and only later did it discuss swordsmanship. After patiently reading through it, he immediately opened the points panel. The three-sword style remained unmoved.
Is the approach wrong?
He pondered for a moment, then shook his head slightly and picked up another book. The 2 rows of bookshelves were filled with such a rich collection of books that it was impossible to read them all.
Akabane casually picked out a few to read. Looking at it again, the score dropped by 5 points. A little uncomfortable.
He sighed softly, having read several books that only scored 5 points. The road to getting something for free was indeed arduous.
First, let's see if there are any books on three-sword style or dual-sword style.
Maybe reading one will boost your points like crazy. Akabane thought to himself, and then changed his strategy. Orthodox samurai are generally one-sword style, with a few mastering the dual-sword style. However, dual-wielding is not used in duels, since dual-wielding tactics are more suitable for group battles than one-on-one combat, especially with short swords. Therefore, if you want to find the three-sword style, you must seek out unorthodox methods. These books are often overlooked. Akabane's eyes scanned the bottom shelf of the bookshelf, and soon he spotted a book on the three-sword style.
It was created by a wandering samurai. The swordsmanship was very crude.
Just by reading the analysis of the swordsmanship and imagining it in his mind, Akabane felt that there were many flaws. To his surprise, the three-sword style score dropped by more than 50 points.
Efficient.
He then began to exploit these unorthodox methods. The price of three-sword style points dropped sharply, from 300 to 250, and then from 250 back to 200.
It finally stopped falling at 100 points. It seems that you can't fully grasp it just by looking at it.
It's like I have the bloodline of the Kurama clan, but I still need 30 points to activate it. Akabane realized what was happening and couldn't help but feel a little regretful.
It's really hard to get something for free. The good thing about Pinduoduo is that it doesn't refuse to give you anything unless you cut the price down to 0. Add 100 points, and the three-sword style is yours. The three-sword style is very complex. The 3 swords must not interfere with each other but must complement each other. The system version not only instilled all the understanding into his head but also enhanced some of his physical instincts. His skill level is roughly the same as Zoro's at the moment. Of course, this only applies to techniques. In fact, swordsmen compete not only in skill, but also in sword speed, strength and moves, which unfortunately Akabane lacks.
He has 80 points in physique, but the physical attributes he obtained through the exchange have no special points, and all of them are mediocre. Therefore, the same swordsmanship, which Zoro uses to kill, might kill him in a duel. What's the point of you reading these books? Kazuki Hatake's expression was strange. I initially thought Akabane wanted to learn swordsmanship, but now it seems that's not the case at all. It seems he really did come here to learn from others. One of my One Piece characters uses the three-sword style, so I came here to read the book and learn from it.
Akabane chuckled and said,
After hearing this, Kazami Hatake felt a little regretful for some reason. If this guy could put that energy into cultivation, his achievements would probably be much greater than they are now. Since the other party neither practiced swordsmanship nor was skilled in physical combat, he had no intention of continuing to dissuade him.
Let him be. Thank you, Uncle Kazami. I've finished reading it.
I'll write down the silent assassination techniques in a book and send it to you later.
Akabane bowed slightly. Well, let's go.
Kazami Hatake gestured for him to leave first, then locked the door, formed a sealing spell, and came downstairs.
Akabane was very happy.
Today's gains were not just 200 points, but also confirmed his suspicions. The points on the list could indeed be reduced through real-world means. In this way, many expenses can be avoided.
For example, the Art of Darkness.
He has already learned how to use it from the third generation, so as long as he draws the storyline, he can exchange it for a low amount of points. The more advanced the technique, the greater the potential for reduction through such methods.
As for low-level ninjutsu like the three bodies technique,
the methods and principles used are too simple. Those points are just tuition fees, and there's no room for them to decrease. Sealing techniques such as the Evil Sealing Seal, the 5 Elements Sealing Seal, and the Corpse Demon Sealing Seal are all recorded in the scrolls of the Uzumaki clan. As long as these contents are drawn, I can exchange them for a low price along with the scroll.
Akabane was excited. He had long coveted those complex yet extremely useful sealing techniques, but he couldn't understand them at all before. After this experiment, learning them would be a piece of cake. Of course. Even if I seal away all the corpse demons, my life is more important than anything else. Okay, I'll learn the 5 elements sealing technique when I get back. Chapter 163. With sealing techniques, we have another way to deal with enemies.
He never thinks he has too many of these skills. You never know when you might need them.
Chapter 163 Expansion of the Guard. The 5 elements seal requires 750 points. A normal A-rank ninjutsu only requires 500 points, but it is extremely difficult to learn. The instructions and techniques on the scroll are almost indistinguishable from a divine book, so it seems to require much more points. Akabane took out the scroll and found the location of the 5 elements seal. He hadn't looked closely before, but this time he examined it carefully from top to bottom, over and over again. Even though he didn't understand many techniques, he memorized them by rote. Before long, the entire principle, formula, and hand seal technique of the 5 elements seal were memorized. However, one more look, 500 points. Reduced by 250 points. Compared to the total price, it's a direct reduction of 1/3, but it's still very expensive. Could it be that swordsmanship is different from ninjutsu, and I need to practice hand seals? Akabane pondered for a moment and practiced the hand seals in the order on the scroll several times. Down 50 points. Is it that he's missing those 50 points? After a moment of thought, he gradually realized, is the tuition fee of 450 because I don't understand the sealing technique at all? Although swordsmanship is profound, Akabane can understand it through imagination alone, based on the words, images, and usage. Sealing technique. Sorry, I really didn't understand. Having figured out the whole story, Akabane silently closed the sealing scroll. Although the 300-point reduction is close to a 50% discount, I used all my previous points to redeem physique items, so I still can't afford it. I don't want to think about it anymore. Earning more points through drawing is the key. Akabane comforted himself and then threw the sealing scroll back to its original position. This afternoon, Yamano Izumi's caravan will definitely arrive. At that time, chapters 56 to 60 will be released, and with the popularity of the Uchiha clan, it will surely be a bestseller. Even though One Piece doesn't sell as well as Naruto, it can still achieve higher sales by riding on Naruto's popularity. Let's go to Orochimaru's place first, he thought to himself. I picked up the design drawings and will give them to Yamano Izumi in the afternoon so they can see if they can manufacture those 2 pieces of equipment. While these items don't offer much improvement for elite Chunin and above ninjas, they are indeed very useful for lower-ranking ninjas. However, plans never keep up with changes. As soon as he stepped outside,
he saw Tsunade walking towards him, and her gaze was a little off. Akabane felt a chill run down her spine from the glare, and only after she reached the side did she ask, "Have you come to pick up Kiyotsuki?" "No, I'll beat you all up." The moment he finished speaking, his fist flew out. Akabane was so frightened that he immediately dodged, but it was clear that the punch was not of superhuman strength and did not cause any damage.
Tsunade was somewhat surprised.
She launched her attack based on past experience, a punch that Akabane would not have been able to dodge.
He's even faster now than he was a few days ago.
She was surprised for a moment, then silently put her fist away and said, "Grandma wants to see you."
"That's okay."
Akabane hesitated for a moment, then nodded in agreement. When she last met Mito Uzumaki, she was quite friendly towards the Uchiha clan and strongly agreed with Uchiha Genkai's actions.
Therefore, there shouldn't be any problems with this trip. On the contrary, there might even be some rewards. He secretly dreamed about it.
Akabane noticed the distinctive mark between her eyebrows, a in seal.
It seems Tsunade hasn't been idle during this time either. He secretly thought.
It's not like Mito Uzumaki was just teaching a few people, she probably taught sealing techniques to several members of the Uzumaki clan, and Tsunade was just incidental.
"Excuse me, how long have you been learning the negative seal printing technique?" Akabane was somewhat curious.
He had seen the in seal technique, it was extremely profound and he couldn't understand it at all.
Tsunade counted on her fingers and said, 3 days? 3 days? Akabane was taken aback, then fell silent. "What's wrong? Have you been learning sealing techniques lately?" Tsunade asked thoughtfully.
Akabane shook his head and said, "No, I just took a look."
Sealing techniques are quite difficult to learn. If you want to learn, you can ask your grandma to teach you," Tsunade said.
She felt that since Akabane had sealing technique scrolls, it would be a waste not to learn them properly.
Akabane could only remain silent. Even with Mito Uzumaki's guidance, it's quite remarkable that someone could learn the in seal in such a short time. If it were him, he would probably be so angry that Mito Uzumaki would die sooner. In order for her to live a few more years, let's wait for the points to accumulate, he silently complained to himself. Tsunade walked straight to Mito Uzumaki's courtyard and left without a second thought.
She was very busy during this period, as she had to train her chakra and maintain her physical training, so she didn't have much time for other things.
You brat, you don't come to Senju's place anymore, are you afraid this old man will nag you every day?" Mito Uzumaki sneered. Given her age and experience, how could Akabane not see through her little schemes? "You're right, I've just been a bit busy lately." Akabane was ashamed. Being exposed to my face really made me feel embarrassed. "What are you busy with, Uchiha?"
Mito Uzumaki pointed to a spot and told him to sit down, then sat up straight herself and looked at Akabane. Her expression clearly showed her exhaustion. Obviously, teaching so many unruly kids at once during this period was no easy task. "I was just messing around with it casually, thankfully nothing went wrong." Akabane chuckled. "I'm honestly quite happy that you've taken care of the Uchiha clan." "I heard you recently signed a summoning contract?" Uzumaki Mito asked. "Yes, Baku." Akabane nodded. "I have the sealing scroll for Infomine, so I won't say much." "You're a real handful, it seems like you have everything." Mito Uzumaki pondered for a moment, then suddenly felt an unbearable headache. This guy seems to have everything and lack nothing, so it's really not easy to solve his problems. Finally, she gestured towards Akabane and asked, "What are your thoughts?" After pondering for a long time, Akabane said, "I want to learn the art of superhuman strength." "You are joking?" Mito Uzumaki was somewhat surprised, clearly not expecting Akabane's target to be this. "Superhuman strength? Is that something your family can handle?" "Wow, I'm not kidding, I really want to learn this," Akabane said. This was a well-thought-out decision. Since speed cannot be avoided, then violence will be used to solve the problem of close combat for speed ninjas. Superhuman strength is one of them. No matter how fast you are, seize the moment and punch me, knocking me down instantly. As for that fleeting opportunity, dark travel, encountering Naraku, or something similar are all possibilities.
Let me check on your physical condition. Mito Uzumaki stood up from her chair and walked over to Akabane. She not only knows sealing techniques, but also some medical skills. After a quick examination, a look of surprise appeared on her face. Is this the physique of the Kamehameha clan? What a liar! She stared blankly at Akabane with a look of utter disbelief, and after a long while said, "Your body might actually be good enough to learn superhuman strength techniques." Of course. Akabane chuckled. With the Vortex Physique's life force enhancement plus 80 points to physique, his physical attributes couldn't possibly be lacking. Okay, I'll teach you. Mito Uzumaki sat down and then explained the principles of her superhuman strength technique. Akabane could understand these things, though he didn't understand much of it. The most demanding aspect of the super strength technique is chakra control, but as a genjutsu ninja, his forte is chakra control, so learning this technique is a piece of cake for him. But the principle is easy to understand, but mastering it is not easy. Superhuman strength is not just about chakra control, but also requires coordination of the body's muscles. Akabane is truly a novice when it comes to taijutsu. He studied for a while and finally figured out the trick. However, page 160. This was enough to surprise Mito Uzumaki. While the super strength technique isn't difficult, it demands extremely high levels of physical fitness, chakra, and control. It took Tsunade quite a while to learn it, but Akabane mastered it much faster. At this rate, he'll be able to use it in a little while. Having learned superhuman strength, Mito Uzumaki did not try to stop Akabane from staying. She needs some time to calm down and stabilize her chaotic emotions. The Kurama clan, known for their superhuman strength? On closer inspection, it does have a lot of potential. The Kurama clan's close combat skills are well known in the ninja world, so who would have thought that Akabane would have such superhuman strength? If it comes at a crucial moment, it can absolutely turn the tide of the battle. However, this strong sense of incongruity. It's like Hashirama has become cold and doesn't like gambling anymore. Sigh, I really don't understand. She sighed softly. The world is changing too fast, and she's slowly losing touch with it. At this moment, Uchiha Genkai, who had rarely been here in many years, came to the conference room of the Hokage building. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo, Koharu Yutane, and Hamura Mitokado sat in a circle. Please take a seat. The third Hokage gestured for Uchiha Genkai to sit down. Danzo hadn't removed the bandages yet, but he diligently attended the meeting. Uchiha Genkai looked around and knew in his heart that these people had already held a meeting long ago. The four had already reached an agreement on the distribution of benefits and power. When he arrived, he was simply announcing the results. However, he didn't care. The Uchiha's attitude was clear: it wouldn't be right for the Hokage's lineage not to offer benefits. Besides, he is truly sincere, so it doesn't matter if there's no benefit to it. After a long silence, Danzo spoke first. Yuan Hai, I heard you've awakened the Manjikyu Sharingan? To my shame, the kaleidoscope was only turned on at the last minute that day. Uchiha Genkai nodded, without denying it. Such an unconventional illusion technique as the Hell of the Shackles could not be hidden from the Umbu ninjas, and he had no intention of denying it. Showing off your strength appropriately can increase your bargaining power. It's been many years since the Uchiha clan has had a Manjikyu Sharingan. Your awakening of the Manjikyu Sharingan is a great thing for the village. The third Hokage praised them, then added, your Uchiha suffered significant losses this time. Considering this, we've discussed it and decided to involve other clans in the guard force. We also hope that your Umbu can contribute. This is a requirement. Uchiha Genkai lowered his eyes and nodded in agreement, no problem. The guard team will still be under your command, but with the participation of various ethnic groups, the number of personnel will be relatively large. Therefore, you can choose your own training location. The duties of the guard team will also be changed. They will not only be responsible for the safety of the village, but also for the safety of the surrounding area and some daily issues, such as gate entry and exit records, commercial disputes, and the suppression of bandits in the surrounding area.
The third generation continued.
This is a benefit. Uchiha Genkai breathed a sigh of relief.
The third Hokage's intention was to expand the guard and incorporate other foreign ninjas, while also further increasing their duties and powers.
The current security detail finally resembles a government department. Once you have a certain number of people, some tasks from the Dark Division will be transferred to you. From now on, your guard team will be the Dark Division in the open, and you will be responsible for the security issues within the Land of Fire. Danzo said coldly. Yes, I understand.
Uchiha Genkai lowered his head, his heart filled with joy. Judging from this, the future guard force is essentially a law enforcement team in the open, responsible for some overt issues in Konoha and the Land of Fire. However, as the guard force expands in the future, its power will likely be dispersed. One thing will never change: the Uchiha will always have a place in the power circle of the guard.
Chapter 164. Young man, are you interested in joining the guard team? The gatekeeper has been replaced by an Uchiha? Akabane was somewhat surprised to hear the news brought by Yamano Izumi.
Yes, the people in Konoha's gate have now been replaced by Uchiha people, and they have even posted a notice stating that these duties will now fall under the jurisdiction of the guard, and the guard will be expanding its recruitment in the near future due to a shortage of manpower. When Yamano Izumi led the convoy in, he paid special attention to the inspection process, which was different from usual, and thus noticed these differences.
Akabane fell into deep thought.
The gatekeeping has been handed over to the guards, and the guards are even being expanded, indicating that the power structure within the village is beginning to change.
I wonder who will be targeted by the expanded enrollment.
If they were to face various powerful families, the Kurama clan might also be within the scope of the conscription.
But it doesn't feel like much.
The Uchiha people are quite easy to get along with, and none of them are as arrogant as the rumors suggest. Yamano Izumi smiled and casually helped one of the guards unload a box of comics. Some of them are just rumors, after all.
Akabane smiled slightly.
Even an outsider said so, which shows that the involvement of the guards in these tasks would be a plus. If you sincerely serve the people, everyone will naturally recognize your efforts. If the Uchiha clan members act recklessly and gain power, it will only increase the villagers' hatred of the Uchiha clan.
This is one of the reasons why Uchiha Genkai was determined to eradicate this cancer. How many are there in total?
Akabane pointed to the cars. Previously, only one car had come, but this time there were two. Although each car was relatively small, each comic book was packed in a box, so it was clear that there were many more than before. Naruto Volume 10 has 150 copies, Volume 11 has 200 copies released initially, One Piece Volume 4 has 200 copies, and Jiraiya Ica Desert has 50 copies. Shan Yequanhong took out a piece of paper and read it while announcing his name. Things are different now, there used to be only one type of comic being updated. Finally, he seemed a little hesitant, and after considering it for a long time, he said, "By the way, Mito-sama recently contacted me, wanting to publish a manga with me."
Who is it, Lord Mito? Akabane was stunned.
Who else could it be but a lord from the Senju family?
Yamano Izumi's expression was one of respect and awe, but also seemed to carry a hint of annoyance. That expression is as strange as it gets.
Mito Uzumaki's drawing skills were undeniable, but Akabane couldn't understand why he had such a strange expression on his face. Seemingly understanding Akabane's doubts, Yamano Izumi lowered his voice and said, "Mito-sama drew the first generations, well, something a little unusual."
Something's not right? Considering Hashirama Senju's personality in the manga, Akabane roughly understood what was going on. Even if we were to discuss the first generation, Yamano Izumi would be afraid of offending his superiors. He wanted to laugh, but felt it was understandable. After all, although Yamano Izumi is the factory manager of the arsenal, he is essentially working for the daimyo, and his status is incomparable to that of Konoha. Therefore, Akabane offered a suggestion: why don't you have Granny Mito write the opening remarks for the series? Wouldn't that make it the most authentic memoir? Who in the world understands Hashirama Senju better than Mito Uzumaki? A word to wake up the dreamer. Yamano Izumi's eyes lit up, and he instantly understood. He nodded repeatedly and said, "Memoirs, that's right. As long as we can get the acknowledgements and statement, even the higher-ups can't say anything.
He had already seen signs of a large fire.
How it works out is up to you.
Akabane offered some advice but didn't intend to get involved any further. For other people's comics, there might only be a limited number of places to sell them, but it's different for Hashirama Senju.
Hashirama Senju's daily life.
It should be quite interesting, even he is somewhat looking forward to it. After finishing the conversation, Akabane took out the blueprints and equipment he had obtained from Orochimaru and handed them to Yamano Izumi, saying, "By the way, let's get down to business.
The equipment I mentioned to you before is this kind of device. Let me see."
Yamano Izumi picked up the two pieces of equipment and examined them closely.
He could understand the first one, but the second one. Are there any particularly high requirements for this bell? Yamano Izumi asked.
Akabane handed over the design drawings for the bell. Yamano Izumi took them and glanced at them a few times, then said, completely bewildered, "I don't understand."
Can you explain it to me? You still can't see it.
Akabane glanced at it, but gradually lost confidence. He didn't understand it either. Although the structure and principles are written out, the symbols, manufacturing requirements, and so on are explained in a very Orochimaru-like manner, which is profound, obscure, and difficult to understand. After thinking for a while, he said, "Just make them according to the specifications above, try to make them as detailed as possible, and make 10 to try first."
Okay, I'll give it a try first.
As for the money, I'll calculate the cost later and then we'll settle it with you.
Yamano Izumi was very generous.
He had a long-term partnership with Akabane and knew him well enough, so he wasn't worried about the cost of a few weapons. After Akabane finished speaking, he looked at another design drawing. Yamano Izumi looked down, then looked up again, and suddenly noticed someone peeking at Akabane not far behind.
He was about to remind Akabane when the person spoke first. "Akabane, what is this weapon for?" "Huh, what's that sound?"
Akabane turned his head and saw someone he hadn't expected, Uchiha Genkai.
At this moment, he also noticed Yamano Izumi's expression, so he smiled and said, "Don't be afraid, he is the head of the Uchiha clan."
"So it was you."
"Your Excellency." "It's okay, no problem." Uchiha Genkai didn't care.
He had been living in seclusion within his clan, so he rarely ventured out, and few outsiders had ever seen him. Therefore, it is normal that Izumi Hiroshi did not recognize him.
"It's Orochimaru's creation, it's a pretty good weapon."
After giving his introduction, Akabane returned to the topic of the two weapons. Seeing Uchiha Genkai and thinking about the expansion of the root guard, he suddenly realized that they were needed more than the new root guard.
Uchiha Genkai's eyes lit up and he said, "Oh? Can I see its power?"
"It needs to be infused with chakra, amplified through the air vents, to enhance the impact of the chakra flow and create immense power." Akabane handed it to him, thought for a moment, and then added, "Your strength is quite high, so be careful not to use too much chakra."
"Clear."
Uchiha Genkai put on his clothes, looked around, walked to an open space, and then carefully injected chakra into it.
Not long after. Boom!
With a whoosh, intense chakra was compressed and blown out from the wind hole, directly shattering a large rock in the distance.
"This is quite powerful." Uchiha Genkai was overjoyed. Its power wasn't strong, but it was advantageous because it didn't require hand seals.
As long as one knew how to control chakra, it could unleash considerable power.